Welcome to the Fullcaster Podcast, Episode 7. Our guest today is Patrick Britton. Pat's been in the sport karting game for a while now, but has also had some time in dirt karts, 206, as well as a stint ASA trucks, and now is a proprietor of Red Six RaceGear. Looking forward to hearing a little bit more about the history of sport karting from him, since he's been in it from the indoor days, but also a little bit more about that gig that he's got going on with his own biz. Here in a little bit, we'll get him rolling. As usual, current events here, Dirk. Not a lot's changed. Here we are. We're May 7th, same day as we did the Matt Johnson episode as far as the recording. Not a lot's changed here, but mid of May, we should be seeing NASCAR racing going on, some different things going on. So we should be going racing eventually. I guess the question is going to be, what does that calendar look like a little bit? Let's just talk about the sport karting side. Mm-hmm. On the sport karting side, we run 10 races a year for the Sprint Series here at CalSpeed and the Super Series and IronMan.
Right.
Clinics and stuff like that. We do all that kind of stuff throughout the year. It goes from January through end of October. Well, we have 3 Sprint Series down, mm-hmm. and 2 supers and Ironman, which happens on the same day. We've already talked about when we get going again what things could look like, but I think what we might see, or at least what we might have a better opportunity to do here with a little bit of a odd schedule, is maybe do some one-off events or some weird stuff. Yeah. Whether it be an enduro or something like that. And I'll tell you one thing that I wouldn't mind bringing back around.
What is that?
The oval.
The oval would be a lot of fun to have back.
When we did the oval we did the oval for 3 years.
Right.
2014, 15, and 16. Actually, the oval is the first time that you worked out here.
Very first time, yeah.
Yeah, I think you were the flagger?
Unfortunately, that was my first day here, was being a flagger, yeah.
That was 15, I think, right? Because you did the oval as 14. A driver the year before.
That's right.
Yeah. Well, what's cool about the oval on the old deals, it was Long Beach, and then it kind of, long front stretch, Long Beach, and then the short chute that heads towards Horseshoe here at CalSpeed. Yeah. And then went on the off surface, and then came back on the main
inside
straight.
The track, yeah.
We lengthened it, I want to say, in 15.
That's right.
And then we did different things with pit stops and stuff like that. The reason why I'm bringing up the oval is because we are in the month of May. Typically, mm-hmm. The oval would come on the Labor Day weekend. Yeah. And it happened back when we had the Sprint Series at only 8 races instead of 10. Right. When we expanded the Sprint Series, then we had weekends that, used to be available, or afternoons that used to be available.
Now they're booked, yeah.
So where I'm going with that is, let's just say, and I don't hope this at all, but let's just say that the calendar gets all effed up. Right. Maybe we don't get going when we want to get going. We got to do something different. And we got maybe, scrap the calendar or do something different. Man, I kind of like the idea of doing some weird stuff.
I think it'd be kind of neat. Fingers crossed that we're able to hold somewhat of a normal season. But, good part for us. And CalSpeed, lucky to have you and Rob, that there's solid other plans in the works too, for whatever dates may come when we're able to open. But just kind of like how everyone's kind of done the online racing and some other stuff, maybe they'll figure stuff, racing out in this way. I think it'll be kind of neat to see that happen in real life too. We're already kind of seeing it right now with some schedules changing and whatnot. But for us to come back and be like, okay, here's what we're going to do for the rest of the year, have some oddball thrown in, I think that'll be really fun for everyone.
Yeah, if we can't go back to a normal series, right? Mm-hmm. I think that if we can still run a normal championship for the most part, then that's what people are going to want to do. Yeah. But if we can do something different, then I think, for instance, last year's All-Star race, and we had the, the Joker lap. Yes. And some different things that we've been playing around with for a while. Mm-hmm. Maybe, trying to do some stuff like that, just playing around with some crap. That would be kind of interesting to do.
Be something to be a time for us to experiment, for sure.
Yeah, and actually, we were talking about the other day, just you and I, and there's a lot of people, like you had said, you ran in 14 mm-hmm. on the oval, but then you started working in 15. There's a lot of people, like we talk about the Grands, right? Yeah. That are here now that probably started racing here in 17. Well, if you started racing here in 17, then you've never done the oval. You never did Grands.
Yeah.
You never did Petite Machismo.
Yeah.
None of those
4s
Enduros.
or 6 hours.
All there are the Super Series, the Sprint Series, IronMan that in the Machismo.
Right.
So all the like one-off fun stuff that we did because we had availability.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of these newer drivers, if you will, or like the more recent ones, haven't got a chance to try any of that stuff.
It's a good problem, bad problem we have. I mean, with having such a packed calendar, I mean, it's good for business for sure. But on the selfish side, I think it's bad just because I love having those one-off events, just something to change it up in the middle of the year. But we've been able to offer some other stuff we're doing the 2 hours towards the second half of the IronMan season, which has been a lot of fun.
Yeah, kind of a glimpse of something different.
Yeah.
A little bit. Kind of the same vein, but a little bit of a, swing on what it normally is.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, I agree. I think that'd be an opportunity for us to go play around with some stuff. I mean, unfortunately, we're still on a, wait and see. I mean, we're recording this on May 7th, and it will go out the last, oh gosh, what would that be? May 26th or something like that. The last Tuesday of May is when this is going to go out. So I think, I don't know if my math is right. That's either right after Memorial Day or right before. I think it's right after. I think the last Monday is right beforehand.
Yeah, it is after.
So that previous weekend would typically be where it is. What's interesting is, so we just got done with what would be the biggest weekend in racing, typically.
Yeah.
You'd have the Coke 600, or whatever they call it now, the long one, World 600 for NASCAR. You'd have Monaco, and you'd have the Indy 500. Well, I don't know what they're doing for the 600. I don't know what they're doing for the Charlotte race, if that's happening or not. I haven't paid that close of attention. I know Monaco's not a thing, right? And Indy 500's gotten moved.
They'll probably do a F1 race or something. They've been playing around on the game quite a bit, but we'll see.
Yeah. I mean in real life though.
Oh, right, yeah.
Right. So what is typically the biggest racing weekend is now not.
Yeah.
And again, we used to have our oval then, but we're not going to do that. We're not going to be, even if we're open. By the time we're recording this or whatever, it's not going to happen that quickly, right? We won't do it that way. But anyway, long story short, the sport karting gig is a lot of fun. Different ideas, different things to try out. And when we get back to racing again, which I'm really looking forward to doing our CalSpeed live gig, having people come through here and just getting back into karting,
in the track.
Because we talk about competition karting and sport karting, it's karting, but man, two different families, two different groups of people for sure. And one of the cats that is a prominent figure in sport karting. He's former champ in the Super Series and has been in this sport karting, or if you will, arrive and drive game for a long time. He's our guest today, and man, I'll tell you what, I think it's a good time to bring him on here. Let's come on over here, Pat Britton. Patrick Britton, everybody. Thanks for coming out and hanging out with us, bud.
Oh, man, thanks for having me. I'm excited to be here, back at CalSpeed for the first time in what feels like years.
Indeed.
It's been about 2 months. But
you're a former or current, however you want to call it, podcaster. What do you think of the setup we got here?
I like it. It's similar to mine, but you have the fuzzies on the microphones, which we could never afford.
Yeah,
This is actually a dish sponge I just cut up and zip tied it.
I understand that you guys would have a hard time paying for these. These we spared no expense on this. I mean, really, we wanted to have the audio really good. These are about $3 each.
Yeah,
and that was after shipping.
Yeah, no, I mean, the next thing is the pop filter, so that when I say it doesn't go.
That's literally what these are.
Well, those are usually like a screen, like it looks like a tennis racket.
You can do either.
I'm just saying that.
I was thinking a bug zapper.
Oh,
nice. Good sound effects around here.
All right,
I got in my left ear and in my right ear. This is a bad day.
And we just set a record for losing ourselves out of the gate here on the Fullcaster podcast.
Sounds like what I'm used to.
Patrick Britton, though, you do bring that to the table because you're kind of a goofball. But what do you do on a professional basis? On a day-to-day, we like to ask everybody who comes on the show, what is the occupation? How do you make your living?
So I work for a performance suspension company. We make everything from sway bars to shocks to springs, control arms for old muscle cars, across the board, but we also dabble in newer cars, new Camaros, new Challengers, some imports here and there. We actually do a ton of Infinity sway bars.
And this isn't just straight line stuff.
No, this is handling. This is designed to be. It's designed to be track day cars, but that are also driven on the street. So it's the dude that has his old Chevelle, but wants to make it so it can run with a new Camaro, but still be livable. Most of the cars are daily drivers.
What's that? I mean, what's that like? I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, but if you have a call it 70 Chevelle or whatever, that's usually going in a straight line on a drag strip. So that's interesting. You guys are doing it's handling stuff.
Yeah, so the pro touring is really the phrase for it, and that's really taken off the last few years or more. So there's a lot of folks that are getting those big boats to turn, and coincidentally enough, the trick to that is by going full caster. And see what I did there?
Patrick Britton, everybody. And that's the show. Thanks for listening.
So those old cars, they had old bias ply tires, and they ran like 1 degree of caster back then, if that. So now we're putting 13, 14 degrees of caster in these cars.
You know, actually, that reminds me. My dad was working as he was the crew chief for a buddy of his, basically a high school friend. They had I want to say it was a 1970 Chevelle, ironically, that they would do at Portland Speedway. And he said those old Chevys and whatnot, they weren't made to turn, and in fact, they were made to almost not turn, and it was to try to keep things slower. It the manufacturer, Chevy and other manufacturers, built the front ends of those things to not turn so great, stock, to try to keep people from going too fast. So you try to make that thing into a limited sportsman stock car like they were trying to do in the late 80s, early 90s. That thing was a bit of a bitch. So
Very kind of them.
They had to do all kinds of different things to try to get those to turn. Are you having to basically change the front end wholesale on those things to get them to turn the way you want?
Yeah, I mean, it's at the end of the day, it's actually pretty simple. You just move the upper ball joint back. You make an upper A-arm that moves the ball joint as far back as you can put it. So instead of it being straight, the A-arm being, here's 2 holes where it mounts the frame and the ball joint's in the middle like a triangle, you put that upper ball joint so it's in line with that rear mount, basically, and it's like this offset. What is that, a right angle triangle or something? It's not an isosceles. I know that. So you're
I always
just
like that word, isosceles.
yeah.
Sounds like something from old Esquibel or Egypt, if you will.
Egg-white. Oh, Jesus Christ.
My dad used to call it. Yeah, he stuck in some places that called egg wiped.
God. I'm sorry, Patrick. Before you're rudely interrupted, what were you saying?
So that's,
Egg
I mean,
whites.
straight up, that's the biggest thing you can do on those old cars is get some caster into them. They'll drive straighter. The return to
God
center
damn
is
it,
better.
Mike.
Mike's dying. Just dying.
Kevin Smith.
Are we just saying names now, or what's happening?
It's his dad.
My dad. I don't know sure if this is even gonna make the cut. Probably edit the whole thing out, but
I would appreciate it.
man, your pops or somebody in your life that can just like push a button and you start laughing.
Oh, that was my dad the other day, man.
That's me, baby.
I have not heard.
You're pushing the wrong buttons, Patrick.
I have not heard my dad say egg wiped, and since I was probably a teenager, it just popped in my
I
head.
had no idea it was going to be Egypt.
Yeah.
Patrick and I were like, what the
Think about it, though. It makes sense, doesn't it?
Like, I like my egg scrambled, not white.
Nice.
My dad's wise beyond his years. Anyways, I'm definitely editing all this out. This is garbage.
Yeah.
Since you're editing it, I mean, that's, you
Yeah.
know, that's my wife's favorite type of eggs are fertilized, but
Oh, that's definitely going out. We're trying to keep some kind of rating around here.
it's good comedy.
Anyways,
Adult content.
all right. Dot.
I'm all strained now up here from laughing.
Yeah,
This is not good.
We're
Yeah,
8
that's-
minutes in, my man.
We got a long ways
You're
to
8
go.
minutes in. I'm about 3 hours and 8 minutes in.
You better get your second wind here.
No shit.
So, and again, I apologize for going off on a rail there. It just, golly.
Are we back on course now, Captain Captain Phillips?
Anyways, so you work for the high performance joint, and you were telling us how the that whole thing worked, which basically nobody who listens to this show cares about. But all joking aside, yeah. So the suspension game and everything that you got going on a daily, that's the usual. And it sounds like, I mean, is that busy right now? Are there people buying suspension parts?
It's unbelievable. It kind of makes sense after you think about it, but it was definitely not something we expected. It's everybody's stuck at home, And what it is a lot of folks have these parts that they're like, everybody's heard the story of, I've had this Camaro for 30 years and I'm going to restore it one day. And they're collecting parts. And
Now they got
the
time.
one day, huh?
now they're installing those parts. We're going to see car shows really bumping here in a couple months.
That actually makes a lot of sense, though. You got a little bit of downtime. If you go out to the garage and all you see, first person I think of is Sean Buer, right? Our good buddy Sean. He's got the GTO, which is actually not in disrepair of any kind, but it is a car that he has, and it's in the garage the entire time.
Yeah.
And you go out to the garage for any reason, you look at that thing and just maybe you start sparking ideas of what could I do, or if I had this or whatever.
Right. What else are you going to do? I mean, if you're a photographer right now, there's nothing really to photographer right now. And it's what else you got to work on something. You know, for Derek and I, it's been iRacing. For you, it's, I'm assuming, drinking beer or something. I don't know.
Yeah. If you look at me, that's what it looks like. But the high performance stuff. See how I just breezed past that joke. The high performance stuff is not the only thing that you're doing. You actually have your own business.
Yeah. So Red Six RaceGear, something I started beginning of last year. It started out as kind of like any business, you have one aspiration for it, then you quickly realize that you have to pivot a little bit sometimes. Started out as kind of a retail karting shop for safety gear, suits, gloves, shoes, selling other people's stuff. Quickly realized there is no money in that. None. If you're just selling other people's stuff, you are breaking even at best. You're lucky to pay your rent.
It's got to come down to volume, I would say.
And I'm not going to compete with direct. They all do direct sales, and then there's the huge warehouses of the world. Everybody knows who they are. Not competing with them. Just can't do it. So I was barely keeping my doors open, just like cutting by every month, which everybody kept telling me, that's great. Like, you're not going into debt. That's awesome. And I'm like, yeah, okay, but
I want to make a living off of it.
Yeah, I gotta find an avenue here to make this work. So we started going down the custom gear route to be the affordable but yet quality custom gear. We don't want to be the cheap where you're wearing pajamas or it looks cool but it doesn't actually do anything. So we're trying to be the mid-range type of deal. Yeah, you can go get your custom OMP stuff. You can go get it from Freem or however that's pronounced. If you want top stuff, you go to Freem. Like you want to spend $1,000 on a suit, I will send you there. I can sell you their suits, but that's not what I'm trying to do. I'm trying to be, hey, you're a dude that goes, maybe you're sport carter, maybe you're a shifter carter at CalSpeed, maybe you're a SCUSA guy that doesn't want to spend that kind of money, but you want to look good.
Yeah,
I got you for $300. You can have a full custom suit that's gonna protect you. You come out of that cart, yeah, you're gonna need a new suit, but you're gonna be fine.
The suit did its job.
That's exactly right. People will say, well, like, hey, if I come out of the cart, like, am I gonna need a suit? I'm like, you should always replace
probably gonna need
all your gear. You come out of the cart.
Yeah.
There's one driver who I won't name out here who's still wearing a helmet that hit the ground a couple years ago and has a huge gouge missing out of it, but he doesn't want to replace it because it has custom paint on it that was really expensive. And I'm like, buddy, you need a new helmet.
Just paint over it.
He's gonna know who it is once I say this,
stickers.
but I don't care. He wears it on his motorcycle too.
Yeah.
And I'm like, come on, man, you're gonna hurt yourself if you go down again.
Meanwhile, he's like, Patrick keeps trying to sell me a helmet.
Right.
And I'm not buying it.
And we're like, don't do it.
Yeah. Right.
No, I'm just kidding. Yeah, so what made you want to get into the apparel? I actually remember that a little bit on the internets when you were making that initial transition, trying to think about what you wanted to do from a previous occupation, and you came up with, I'm going to become a business owner, and it's going to be safety gear. How did you get to that step?
So I used to work for HJC Helmets years and years and years ago, and it was something that I always thought about there. Is I'm like, hey, you know what? I'm learning about the manufacturing side of things, and they're kind of that same niche in a way where they make a quality product, but it's not, it's not the $1,000 helmet. You can get a $1,000 helmet from them, but that's not their bread and butter. And it's kind of like, hey, Stilo is up here, top tier helmet.
Yes, it is.
Yes, and if you want to,
very comfortable, the Stilo helmet, actually.
And Stilo's the stuff. If you want that nice helmet, go get a Stilo. But if you want a helmet that's almost as comfortable, almost as light, just as safe, because all helmets are passing the same safety standards, you go get an HJC. In my mind, you want to spend $350 on a helmet, that's where you go.
A little bit more bang for the buck. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean that's the way I see it. Is
it's cheaper anyway.
Yeah,
right. Yeah. That's all I'm saying.
It's one of those things where they coexist. I feel like, and that's the way that I feel like, is I'm kind of trying to be the HJC of custom gear. And so when I was there, I was like, I kept thinking like, man, like I feel like there's something to this, and I've always, enjoyed doing some of the design work, and I've always liked doing a little bit of everything. I want to be able to say, the suit should look like this, have these features, do this, do that, do this, whatever. And then I also want to be able to say, somebody comes to me and say, I want a suit that's these colors, make it for me. So that's what I do. I make the suit. So that wasn't the original goal with Red Six, because I always wanted to do that down the road, but that wasn't an off the bat idea. What it was that I was working for another company, and it ended in a very negative way. If we get a few more beers in me, I might go into detail.
Just that last one right there, actually. That's all
right. I mean, I'll go into details. Won't name the name. But it ended very poorly in a way that made me extremely unhappy, and it kind of soured me on a lot of things. And I was like, you know what? I'm gonna go do my own thing. Got some money put together and went and just. It was actually, strange enough, it was leaving Machismo.
Really?
At the end of, I guess that was 2018.
Yeah.
I was driving out of here, and I called my wife, and I went, you know what? There was a lot of people here that I saw walking around going, I need just talking to, because I wasn't racing. I was like, there was people here that were needing gloves or needing shoes or a helmet or whatever. And people were like scrambling, like, who has a clear visor? Who has a clear visor? And the lights gone down, and I didn't think ahead, even though I knew it was going to be dark. And like, they didn't. And I was like, there's a market for somebody to be there being like, I got you, dude. Here, take the shield. Come pay me when you get off the track. Don't worry about it. Go have fun. And I'm like, so I called my wife. I'm like, hey, I'm going to start a business. And she's like, it's midnight. Okay, sure. It's great. And so she was real supportive of it. And
then she woke up the next morning. She's like, Patrick had the most terrible nightmare. I dreamt you were going to start a business.
And it was like at the time I had a 6-month-old daughter, and so I'd gotten let go of this job with a basically a newborn, and I was like, this is BS. Like I'm gonna go do something. I mean, I'm gonna take a shot at this. I've been wanting to do this for a long time, so let's just go take a shot at this. So that's what we did, and I found some retail space and bought a lot of stuff for not very much money. Found like an Osh Hardware that was going out of business and bought all their storage racks.
Nice.
They were 3 months old, and I got them for literally pennies on the dollar. I got like $100,000 in racks for like $1,500.
Wow.
And that was the whole thing. I bought like old, so I didn't know carpet tiles were a thing. Like
Carpet tiles?
Yeah, there's carpet, but it's like a square
I did not know
tile.
that.
I know, they're the coolest thing though. I got so excited about carpet tiles when I found out about them.
He's like, I did my whole house in them.
You spent $2,000 on carpet towels. The red.
I did. And I want to do my garage in carpet tiles. The coolest thing is if it gets dirty, you take that one up. They're not glued down or anything. You just throw it away and get a new one. And each one's like $2. And it adds up. But I was like, that's the coolest thing. So I got these. I'm like, what's discontinued? And I found some that all had like a strip of carpet missing in the middle. He's like, take them. Just take them.
That's the kind of weathered look we're looking for here at Red Six.
You couldn't see. You just turn each one a different direction so they don't all line up. And so it was like that. So that was where I learned all this, like, let's be thrifty. Let's be thrifty. Oh, it's time to buy a computer. I'm doing the money sign if you can't see the video.
Yeah.
And
you spent the money where it needed to be spent, and you were resourceful when you had to be.
Yeah, that was basically the idea. And it was, it was really an interesting process. I went from 0 to open in 2 months, including buying a lot of product, which, gosh, dang, that adds up fast. My God. Like, even though you're getting a discount on the stuff because you're buying it in bulk, going direct through these manufacturers is almost impossible when you're new. So if you call up these established guys, they're like, yeah, we want a $30,000 buy. And I'm like, yeah, okay, but you're one of 10 brands I'm going to carry. They're like, yeah, well, have fun. And you're like, ooh.
Right.
So you start trying to work deals with them, and they're not going to give you a line of credit to start with, and all this stuff. And it's you have
an uphill battle. It sounds like
it's big time. So if you could go back, you do a million things different. Just like any business, what now, you can start a new business and spend half the money. Mm-hmm. And have the same result. Because I'd go straight to making custom gear. I would carry very little of other people's stuff, but I would invest. If I could invest all that same money into doing my own custom gear, I'd have 500 suits with 30 different designs.
Yeah.
From I'd be able to pay actual artists to design stuff, and I'm like, God, why didn't I think of this 6 months ago?
Right.
So it's but I think I think if you talk to any business owner, whether it's a karting shop or, this owner of Stilo, they'd tell you the same thing. Yeah, I would do tons of things different.
Right out of the gate.
Yeah, I think it's impossible to start a business. Nobody's going to say, I started a business, I did everything right.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah, for sure. Well, going on from the what you do on a day-to-day, we're obviously here on a karting podcast, but in racing in general, how did you get into racing? I mean, obviously you have the biz, and you even work in an industry that does have something to do with handling, with racing a bit. Where's the racing bug hit you?
Yeah, I was born with it. There's no moment where it got me or anything like that. My dad was a racer. His dad was a racer. My grandpa, so my dad's dad, was a hot rodder back in, straight out of World War II. He was an engineer for every airplane company you can think of. He was an engineer for Ford Aerospace, so he built stuff that went into space. Anything mechanical. That's just how it comes from. My dad was a hot rodder, but then got into a lot of SCCA stuff. He was on the board of directors for either Porsche Owners Club or Porsche Club of America. I don't remember which one. He won SCCA, whatever region down here, F Production Championship 1 year in the 60s. He worked on a Trans Am team in the glory days in the late 60s, when Roger Penske had his Camaro and later his Javelin out there with Mark Donohue. When Bud Moore had the Mustangs, my dad was in that with a kind of a privateer Camaro. So he has firsthand accounts of all the stories of I think it was the Penske car showed up with acid dipped bodies one time, and somebody set a cup of coffee on the roof and it fell through it, that kind of stuff. So he's got all those kinds of firsthand accounts, and Riverside was his home. Practically lived there. Every race you say, oh yeah, here's a race from 1972, and
The old Riverside Speedway that used to be around.
Right. Yeah. And he's like, oh yeah, I was there every time, no matter what. It's always I was there. Yeah.
Wow.
And on Ontario, which is kind of the spiritual, precursor to Auto Club, and so I mean it was nonstop. So for me, it was never not a thing. Racing was a thing from the beginning. I mean, there's pictures of me 6 months old sitting in a cardboard box that my dad painted 300 ZX. He worked for Nissan at the time. Headlights and everything else on. So it's literally there was no other option. I got a Rick Mears little yard cart when I was 4 and promptly parked it through a shed because it was we're not braking,
Wow.
And I wrecked that cart probably 5 or 6 times. At least one time I sent, so it was one of those fiberglass bodied, but then it was really thin metal tubes underneath it on a plastic tub. It's kind of hard to describe. So it had, the front wing like an Indy car would have, and I crashed it into a wooden post, and I put the metal bar that holds the wing up through my leg. And I was probably about 6 years old.
Oh man.
So it was my brother pulls me out of the car, but
you got airlifted out.
You basically, yeah.
Jeez.
And that's just it, and so but there was never oh, that hurt, I'm not going to do it. It's maybe I shouldn't crash, which didn't stick. That didn't stick at all.
How are you getting? I mean, so it's around you and whatnot. But when do you start racing? What's your first racing experience outside of crashing into small sheds?
So the first time I drove anything real was at Adams. I'm sure almost everybody in Southern California. Well, nowadays it's K1, I guess, but back then it was Adams. You want to go try out a kart? It's Adams. So they put me in a class when I was probably about 7 or 8 years old, I guess. I was in a kid kart, which I was probably a little bit too old for in reality. And an instructor who I would love to know who it was, because I'm sure he's still around. It was literally a kid kart around Adams is basically full throttle. And I'm sure it was a detuned kid kart, because it was a class.
They had heard about your prior escapades.
Right.
So,
oh, he
can't get around the backyard. Tune this guy down.
How do you get that scar?
2.5 horsepower. So that was literally about a lap in. I was like, this is too slow. And I was begging them to put me in a cadet kart, begging them, because there was one sitting right there. And I'm like, come on, put me, I want to drive that one. And they're like, no, you paid for the kid kart. You're getting the kid kart. You're not ready yet. I'm like, come on. So we did that. And then some point later is when it got kind of real, when my dad took us over to Rialto Airport Speedway, which was a track that was made at a private little airport in Rialto here in California that was an oval. So it was a
Is that the quarter midget place?
I think it still existed for a while, and they did do quarter midgets. When I was there, it was strictly go-karts, and then a thing called a Mini Stockcar, which is not the same as a mini stock, which we got into later, which we can get into. But the go-kart, he basically took us there, and we watched the race for the day, and then from what my recollection was, he basically saw a guy selling a go-kart out of the back of his truck and said, "Yeah, I'll take it." I'm sure there was more to it than that, but
Yeah.
that was what it was. And it was an old, like probably a 90 or 92 bug. But a bug in 90 was probably no different than a bug in 78 or 80. It was not modern even by that standard. But my dad's always been of the opinion that they got to sell new chassis every year. So they always make you think your old one's no good. So they'll last a whole lot longer than you think they will. So that's how we've always been. So we got that. We stuck a GX 270 or whatever, 6.5 horsepower Honda, the same thing that most indoor tracks run. So basically was sport karting at that point, with a chassis that, there was you weren't lifting the inside tire, you were doing it all with stagger, So we were running that they had 2 junior classes, a 2-stroke and a 4-stroke junior. We were running 4-stroke junior, but we were winning overall. We were beating the HPVs, which is what they're called at the time. And the KT100s, and they were running pipes on the KT100s, some of the kids were running 3 and 4 hole cans, but some of them were running pipes, and we were beating them in the Honda.
Wow.
And it was all, they'd destroy me down the straightaway, but by the time they caught up to my exit speed, we were on the brakes again, and they were on the brakes, I wasn't. So that was like, we were coming at it from a direction that was one of those times where having no experience was the advantage, because we weren't making all the same mistakes everybody else was. We were running like a crazy amount of stagger in the right rear. We were running like 30 pounds of air pressure because we wanted that thing to just roll. Mm-hmm. We were just trying to get no rolling resistance, and because we're running these super sticky Burris tires that were like just for oval racing, and it was too stock for how little horsepower we had. So we were cutting down on the rolling resistance, and just they'd get me at the end of the straightaway, but then they're on the brakes.
That totally reminds me of that story I told about my dad doing the endurance race.
Oh, yeah.
And he's in the Volkswagen Rabbit, and everybody else got like V6s and stuff, right?
Yeah.
And they're kicking his ass on the straightaway, but it's on a half mile, so they all have to slow down. Well, little Rabbit doesn't have to slow down, so he's passing 3-4 cars on the outside through the half mile, losing 1 or 2, getting 3 or 4, losing 1 or 2.
Nice.
Same thing.
It's
low horsepower.
It just, if you can just focus on what your car's good at, you don't have to go and spend all that money. I mean, and that was, Rialto was like the best race that nobody's ever heard of, because we were getting like 40 juniors out there. I mean, literally, like my class had like 40 karts on track.
Wow.
And
this is a little oval?
It was
you have 40 cars
it
on
was
track
probably
in a
a
little oval?
10th mile. It was tiny. And I mean, it was literally from the middle of 3 and 4 on the pace lap, 2 wide, to the entry of the middle of 1 and 2 was all karts. And then the adult freaking Honda class was the most radical thing. I wish I was older so I could have raced in it, because it started as stock on, same engine I was running, 6.5 horse. And they were getting like 40 adults all in one class. And it was just huge. And then they were like, it's too much, so we're going to split this into 2 classes. One stock Honda, one is do whatever the hell you want Honda. Mm-hmm. And actually it became do whatever the hell you want 4-stroke. So we had people out there with, I swear to God, putting 20 horsepower to the ground in their single cylinder Hondas. So this track was really heavily supported by Burris, right? Like, the Burris family. Everybody in karting knows, the Burrises. So they had a kart out there that was, I don't remember if it was confirmed or not, because I was like 9 years old, or if they were like flat, because there was no rules. So they might have been outright saying, yeah, we're running on nitromethane. Yeah, why not? Mm-hmm. I remember him hammering the throttle on exit of any of the corners with those big, like 8-inch wide karting slicks, and just lighting them up. Like, he had enough power, both those rear tires were going up in smoke.
Wow.
And they're like, yeah, it's about 20 horsepower. And I remember my dad laughing, being like, yeah, I think it's like 50. And we had developed, like, we had a kind of a theoretical design that we were starting to work on, where we were going to use a smog pump off of like an 80s Camaro or something, and use it as a supercharger to try to supercharge my brother. My brother raced in that class. So we were trying to figure out how to make the Honda really kick ass. So they're going to supercharge it. We already had like these trick valve springs that let the thing turn like 8,000 RPM, and a big old camshaft, and like the thing just sounds nasty. Like like gnarly. And he was top 10, but he wasn't like winning races. And we're like, well, we need a little more. I'm like, let's supercharge it. And like in hindsight, we're just put NOS on it. Like that would be so much easier. But that was
about what year is this?
This is 99, 2000.
99.
And I bet there's a ton of people that were racing there that are still around, and that I just don't know because I wasn't old enough.
Right.
You know, I'm sure that there's a lot of like the ongoing families that are still around, you know, that were probably out there, and I don't even realize it.
So your first experience as a karter, as a driver of something, is this roundy round at Rialto.
Yeah.
And how long do you do that? And then what do you do on from there?
2 seasons of that, and we run the occasional race out at Apex in Paris. I ran 2 or 3 races.
Is that
there.
oval as well, or is
No, that was
course?
a road course. So
Got it.
that was the only road course. That and Adams before CalSpeed was a thing. That was it. And I actually have a video of my first ever road course race on a VHS.
Oh, cool.
And I qualified 3rd. Don't know how. I was running with the adults, so they weighted me up to the adults. I had like 100 and something pounds of weight on this cart, and because I was the only junior who showed up, and I was 10 years old, and 10 or 11. And there's video. I start like 3rd, and going down the back straightaway, I go into the tuck, and I'm like 4 feet tall, if that. So I'm behind the steering wheel, like I'm underneath it, and you see me just
Before the tuck.
Oh yeah. And so you see me like going down the back straightaway. I just poke out a line and like whoom, and just straight to the lead. And then I go into the next corner and just, you know, newer driver get to the lead. Like I'm racing the adults, I get the lead.
Yeah.
Full brakes, just spin it out into the weeds.
Oh man.
You just lock up. And you're like and you don't know as 11-year-old your first time. You're like, what's happening? I don't understand.
Yeah.
And away you go. And then after that, your confidence is shot and you're just done. So ran a couple of those, and then after that we got I don't remember how we met him, but we got in contact with a guy named Alex DeCure, who was he owned NASCAR Craftsman truck team when they first started in 95, 96. He had won the Mint 400, huge off-road race, and now he was promoting a series that was called the Tri-State Mini Stockcars, which is, if you're not familiar, it's kind of part Allison Legacy car, part Bandolero sort of. So it's still a 4-stroke Honda powered thing, but it's the big frickin' thing, probably 20-ish horsepower, like probably an industrial generator engine, I guess. But it has 4-wheel suspension, but with a solid rear axle. So it's got coilovers all the way around with tubular upper and lower A-arms on the front and a full tube chassis, and the rear is still a solid axle like a go-kart. So that's a very easy transition for me, and they stick me out there. 0 practice. They go, hey, we rented you a car. Let's go run at Orange Show, and go after it. And first race, battling for the win. I don't know any better. Just go in the corner, don't lift, turn the wheel. And so at that point, in my kid brain, it was like, this is going to drive like a NASCAR Cup car. That's how you drive this. So I'm battling for the lead I'm on the outside, and the 3-time defending champion's on my inside. Like the kid's unbeatable, like wins every race. So every time we go into the corner and he's got the inside, so I just drill him in the door, just turn left, and I just park my car with it in his door so he has no momentum. And I come off the corner and pull him a little more, can't quite clear him. Next corner, drill him in the door, and just donuts all up and down the sides of both cars. And finally, did a little too hard and tossed the chain off of it.
Oh man.
And so I park it in the infield, and afterwards, half the people are telling me that's the greatest thing they've ever seen in their lives. Half people are like wanting to kill this 12-year-old kid. And they're like, that was the dirtiest thing I've ever seen in my life. Like, who do you think you are? Blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, I don't know.
Like, well, I'm 12.
Like, right. Yeah. Right. I've seen Dale Earnhardt do it. So that's what we're doing here.
And I just lost my chain. So ease up. All right.
Right. So we like, my dad bought a car at that point. We bought, they were kind of like a kit car almost. Like when you buy like a kit Cobra or whatever, kind of the same thing. You buy this car in bags, and you build it, which he wanted to do because he wanted us to learn about how these work mechanically. So my brother and I both raced. He raced in the adult class. He's 4 years older than me. And then we would take his seat, or I would run in the morning, and then we'd have to unbolt my seat, put his seat in, and change all the suspension because he's quite a bit heavier than me. So all the springs, all the shocks, everything would change. So that would happen every race day. And ran pretty good first year, finished 3rd in the championship, won a couple races, rookie of the year, all that good stuff. And then the next season, I don't know exactly what happened. My brother he wasn't racing it anymore for whatever reason. So it was dedicated to me, and we painted the car black, put a white and red number on the door, and
3 for Dale.
went after it. Yeah, it was a 21, which adds up to 3.
It's divisible by.
Yeah. So we went out, and it was like that was the first time that I really felt like they're here to beat me, not the other way around. I didn't feel like I was having to just kind of mind my manners or whatever. It was, I'm come beat me.
Yeah.
And this is still junior stuff.
Yeah, this
right?
point I'm 13 years old.
Gotcha.
This is 2001, and so it was like they would do a thing where they would invert the field after the first. We didn't qualify, so first heat. Gosh, this has been a while since I've thought about this. I think we ran 2 heat races. First heat was random P pick, and then they would invert the finishing order for heat 2. The track down in El Cajon in San Diego, I led every lap of the season, including the inverts.
Wow.
On those, so I literally would get the lead within 1 lap every time on the inverts.
Wow.
And I mean, I spun out a lot of people to do it.
Really?
It was I never turned anyone on intentionally, but I'd get in there and I'd rattle the cage, and some of them lost it. So you
are literally Dale Earnhardt in this conversation right now. I just meant to rattle his cage. I didn't mean to loop him. I.e.
I never did
Labonte.
anything except hit him in the rear bumper. I never quarter paneled anybody. I never drove across their nose like that and hit them. I hit them in the rear on a track that should be flat out. I was never lifting on this track, even when I was by myself. And I hit them in the rear. If they didn't hold on to it, they didn't hold on to it. Not my problem. So we did great there. At Orange Show, we did reasonable. Those were the only 2 tracks we ran at as juniors. We couldn't run Irwindale for insurance reasons or whatever. Won the championship walking away that year. And then we went straight from that into a Mini Stockcar, which is not the same Mini Stockcar. This is what they run it like that. It's not a pony either. It's a mini stock, I guess.
I think I've seen those. A person I used to coach, Jessica Dana, she did it for a second, and her dad had one or was renting one or whatever. It's literally like the scale is wrong. I was going to say like 8 scale NASCAR.
Sort of. So
it's kind of like that, but with a good check. It's not the Honda that you're talking about. It's got good power. I want to say a smaller motorcycle engine or something like that.
So these are a little different than that. These are kind of like a pony stock, but these are an actual car. So what we're running an 84 Mustang, and it has a 2.3 liter 4-cylinder. A lot of people run Pintos in it, but you were allowed to run any 4-cylinder car as long as it was, the rule started you could run any 4-cylinder car.
Right, that is different, yeah.
We showed up with a SVO Mustang, which is a turbo Mustang, and they did not take kindly to that at all. So we had to take turbo off. And we're still pretty competitive, but the car was just too heavy for a little quarter mile short track. There was a Honda CRX that just kicked everyone's ass. Back to that rabbit conversation. Mm-hmm. And it was, you learn real quick that racing at Orange Show and a lot of short tracks, if they don't care, you're 14 years old, and they'll just wreck you. Like, it's not running into the back.
Kind of like old Patty B at the previous track.
They weren't just running into the back of you. They would if you passed them, you better make sure you're clear of their nose before you go into the next corner, because they would just hook that left front right into your right rear quarter panel and try to turn you head on in the fence. I mean, and you're going maybe 50, 60 miles an hour at apex, but there's no brakes on these things hardly. They don't stop. And there's no tire. You're running treaded tires, so it's that one was we ran that for only a season because it was like we were just tearing stuff up, and we did not view that as anything close to an actual competition in a sense of they was just who could run into each other the best. And like I said, it wasn't like you'd get to their bumper and move them out of the way. It was straight up they would just wreck you. And
it's like the old bomber class they got now.
It was 4-cylinder bombers is really what it was. So we went straight to that, from that to an ASA Speed Truck, which is a tube chassis, small block Chevy V8, 400 something horsepower. It's a race car.
So correct me if I'm wrong, but aside from your brief moments at Paris, you've pretty much been roundy round in more car-esque type stuff, oval stuff this entire time.
I had road raced twice in my life when I got into sport karting. That was it. I did not know anything about road racing at all.
Wow.
I watched Formula One, IndyCar, but I was a NASCAR guy growing up, and then, we got into speed trucks, and that was more oval racing. That was, again, got back to the gentleman I talked about earlier, Alex DeCure, who was organizing that Mini Stock series, he ran several trucks in the speed trucks. His son, who was an accomplished driver and was a instructor out here, actually when they used to do the IndyCar experience, he was an instructor here, and he had a few trucks, so we bought one from him, and that was one of those things where we were okay until I wrecked the first time, and then we fixed it, the way that made sense, and the setup was never right again. Oval racing setup is so horrendously different than what you would expect anything to be that we were just always chasing our tail. For 4 years, we were just chasing our tail. And we would have just little silly issues, like because our chassis was a little different than everybody else because we had one of the earliest ones, so it was kind of like a prototype almost.
And after the crash, it was custom.
Yeah. I mean, and they clipped it, cut the front end off and put a new one on. And we had an issue at one point where we figured out that when we were going through the corner and the suspension loaded, it would the bottom of the coilover perch would then sit down on the frame, and then it was cone shaped. So as it went through the corner, it would slide off, and it would suddenly unload all the suspension, and it was just causing me to just loop with no notice at all. We ran it 6 months like that, and we had no idea what was going on. I'd be driving fine, and then you take the corner a little bit different, and it would just sit on there, and I never felt it, and all of a sudden you're backwards. Jeez. And you're like, and we just couldn't figure it out, kept making setup changes, making it worse in reality, because then once we figured it out, now you got to start all over. So it was like just that for years.
And you said for 4 years you did, so you did the truck for a bit.
Yeah, we ran 2 full seasons. We ran a partial season the first year, 2 full seasons, and then another partial, I believe, if memory serves. So that was when I was a teenager. I was like 15 when we started, and I stopped when I was 19. And we were going to keep after it. I mean, if I could go back, I probably would have ran a Legends car or something and taken a little intermediary step. But that series had TV coverage, and they make it, the drivers are kind of they need car count, so they make it sound like it's, you're going to get sponsors no problem, and you're going to have 500,000 viewers every race, and blah 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 blah, and and that's all true. But from a driver development standpoint, it was absolutely the wrong decision, in hindsight. But it was it's what we thought was the right decision. But the thing is nobody came out of that series. Nobody that I'm aware of ran anything more than a race or two and went on to do anything. I think there's a couple people who dabbled in it, but.
And what years are you running this?
2004 through 2007.
Got it. So this is after we had talked to Cameron. He had done the ASA trucks. This is after Cameron was out.
Strangely enough, I've driven Cameron's truck before he owned it.
Really?
Wow. Yeah. So I got out of it the year he started. So he bought.
I thought he did. Oh no, he did. I had my dates wrong.
I think he got into it in 07, and I got out of it in 07. But we never crossed paths. They started like middle point. I got out in the middle of it. So it's like literally we missed each other by a little bit.
Gotcha.
But his truck was actually a kind of a faux teammate to mine, where we had the same guy kind of helping us out as sort of a quote unquote crew chief. Yeah. And so one point I swapped seats with another driver because we were like, my truck was undrivable loose. And they're like, man, like it's not like the setup's the same. And I'm like, I'm telling you, my truck's undrivable. Like I cannot get this thing around the racetrack. I got in his truck, picked up half a second, and would have been on pole by 3/10. He got in my truck, spun it out first corner. And we're like, there's something up with the truck. Like there's something going on.
This is when you find out that it's cattywampus?
Yep. That was what led to the deep dive into it. So it was one of those things where it was a spec series, but there was a lot of differences throughout the years. And that was one of those political things. It's one of the things you find out later. We're building a hot rod, old muscle car, and we're getting some machine work done on it, and we're at an engine shop. And we look down at some of the engines lining up, and I see one that has a driver's name from that other series. I'm like, oh, what a coincidence. He's building a hot rod too. He's like, I don't know. It's for some race car or something. Like, oh, yeah? Did it tell you anything? He's like, I don't know. It's like some kind of truck. I never heard of a race truck, but we're doing this and that. And I'm like, the spec series with sealed engines, and it's in here getting, bigger cam, whatever, doing some head work. And you're like, yep, that's, and that's just one of those things like that. That's racing at every level. I don't care what, if you're kid karts, it happens. You're in cup cars, it happens. There's how many people talk about, you like with world formulas, for example, back in the day, you'd buy 10 of them. dyno them if you had the provisions, and then pick the best one and sell the other 9. Money wins races, even if you're in a spec series.
Yeah, I mean, and granted, World Formula is not spec, but yeah,
Well,
the point is the same. Is that everything's going to have margins and whatnot for sure. What was the transition? Why did you guys stop doing cars? I mean, you were what, late teens, early 20s?
Yeah, late teens. I was about 17 or so ish. It started to get a little expensive because the reason we were doing half seasons because I kept tearing the truck up, and it would take us. We're a team of 3, and it would take us a while to fix it. So that was wearing thin. There was also just a lot of frustration on my part because I was not winning races at all. I was barely running competitive. And then my dad actually was diagnosed with throat cancer. So it was, he never at any point said, hey, let's stop racing, or we can't afford to do this anymore. I said, no, I know how expensive this is, even though you guys won't tell me. They never said, hey, this is really expensive, but I
Right.
knew, I knew what the stuff costs and all that. And I was fortunate enough that we had some sponsors, but I was really fortunate that my parents were able to kind of float it for a long time. And up until the speed truck, I don't think it was that big of a deal, but the speed truck took things to a whole new level. So when that happened, I said, no, I don't want to do this anymore. I'm not having any fun. So why do it?
Roughly what year is that, if you don't mind?
This is,
Give me an idea where we're at.
you know what? I think I was off earlier. I guess this is beginning of 06. Yeah, I was a year off earlier. It was beginning of 06. Because Kaylee and I met at the end of 05, and she went to one speed truck race.
Gotcha.
Where I promptly dropped a cylinder, ran on 7 cylinders all race.
Kaylee being your wife.
My wife, yeah, Kaylee. Actually, she went, that was it. That was it. She should have gone to the previous one where I finished 9th on 3 wheels. That was cool. That was my only speed truck memory that's positive.
Oh, jeez.
I don't see how that's positive.
Yeah. We finished.
I finished 9th out of 30 on 3 wheels, Derek.
All right, fair enough.
And I started 29th.
Hey, VHS didn't count.
Oh, nice.
That one wasn't televised. Of course it wasn't.
So you had a rough time with things in the truck deal. So and unfortunately your pops gets the bad diagnosis there, and then you guys you basically make the call that, hey, let's hit pause on this thing if nothing else.
Yeah, and I think there was actually almost some disappointment from the rest of the family because I think everybody liked doing it, but I was like, this isn't free, and my dad had to retire, was the big thing. He worked at car dealerships and made a pretty good living, but overnight literally had to retire. And all of a sudden, he's living off of what they had saved and the retirement, but retirement is going to run out at some point, whatever.
Yeah.
Don't even get into all that. And then, so I didn't race anything for a few months, and because I was over it. I was like, racing is stupid. I hate racing. This is,
it was just way more stressful for you at that point.
It was, and it was like, I kept thinking like, man, if I were good at baseball or I was good at football, my talent would have got me there.
Dude, I've had that thought so many times. I'm like, man, if I had been good at a normal sport,
at least you know where you actually stand.
But I'm like, it could have been so much cheaper for me and my parents. Yeah. Like, I would feel so less bad about me trying to go a race.
Yeah, and then I ask you, just think if you were actually good at karting. It was a loft.
No, it's. I always feel like, let's say you're good, let's say you're really good at football as a kid, right? And you go Pee Wee, and high school you're a starter, and you get to college and you're mediocre. Well, at least you know, hey, my talent got me that far.
Yeah. At the end of the day,
that's
your physical attributes, what you're able to do and your physical skills, no one's buying it more. They may want it more, maybe they do more practice, what have you.
Right.
Or maybe they're physically more capable. But you never have that little thing in the back of your head saying, I got outspent, or I had I didn't have as good of opportunities, or what have you.
That's the truth. And in racing, it's a little controversial, but the reality is nobody knows how good of a driver they actually are. Very, very few people actually know how good they are, because there's so many variables in racing. And that's part of its charm, because being a great driver only gets you so far. You got to know how to tune it a little bit. You got to know how to give feedback. You got to know how to adapt, which arguably that's part of driving, but it's also kind of not, so it's like, you got to have all these different things. Being a pure driver only gets you so far.
Yeah.
And there's some amazing pure drivers in sport karting, for example, that do well, but then the next race, they're not so good. But they have all the talent in the world, but the rest of it's not there.
Right.
And
that's why, but you see so many of these scholarship programs where now it's not only driving on the track, but you do a day of media, and you do a day of working with a
Because
engineers.
at the end of the day, it is a job, and you have to do your part of it when you're not in the seat.
Yeah.
And that's,
Right.
it's money.
At the end of the day, a driver's replaceable. If you think about an NFL quarterback, they are not replaceable. There's a million people that would love to take their seat. They can't do it.
Right.
The guy riding the bench ain't as good as you. In a go-kart, if all of a sudden a spot opens up, they're going to find somebody who they can put in there that's going to, with very few exceptions, if they have their pick of anybody, they can go just as fast as you.
And there's going to be that guy that has more money than you too. That can, pay that team a little bit more.
Yeah, and I mean none of this is groundbreaking. Everybody knows this,
right?
And maybe some people choose to ignore it, but it's the truth. So I got over all that stuff. I was just done with racing, and I was like, I wasn't even watching racing. I did not care. I was like, this is just and whatever. I don't care anymore. So then. A couple months later, my brother actually got a job at Dromo 1 as their mechanic, and
Dromo 1 being the used to be around indoor track here in SoCal off Catella, I believe it was, in Orange,
right next to Honda Center where the Ducks play and all that stuff. So actually right in my backyard. I live about 5 minutes from the track. I'd gone there a few times just playing around in arrive and drives. It was the only gas track and by far the best gas track in all of Southern California, if not the whole Southwest. It's long since gone away now, gone out of business. So my brother got a job there as a mechanic, and I didn't know any of the people there or anything like that, but he kept saying like, yeah, you should come run the leagues, you'll have fun with it. And I'm like, nah, I don't really want to. So finally one day, he goes, hey, a spot just opened up in the league tonight. It's like a Tuesday night. It says, come race. And they run these once a month. It's not a weekly thing. This is like their races. They ran one season a year, one champion a year. Like the races they sell out. They got like 40 people, which is a lot for an indoor.
Wow.
Champion.
Yeah.
And then he said, hey, a spot just opened up, and GM here, Brad, said he'll save you the spot.
Brad Packard,
who then became the GM, I guess, of CalSpeed.
Yeah, he was the GM here before he left. Yeah,
I didn't know what his actual title was. He was pre-Mike.
Second to Rob.
Yeah, right. Yeah. Back when there was like 3 people working here, it was like Rob, Bob, and Brad. So they saved me the spot, and I showed up and obviously I'd been there, and I show up in my Nomex and my helmet and all that stuff. It's painted, and I didn't know anybody. I didn't even make an attempt at getting to know anybody. Didn't care. I was there. I'm there to win. Don't remember much of the race at all, except that I finished second in the C main. There were 5 mains, so it was an E main. And I finished second in the C main on just knocking the rear bumper off of the guy in front of me, who later found out. I got to know after a time his name was Efren Oliveras. And he was doing this thing where he would not run the heat races, and he would start in the lowest main and try to make his way into the A, because if you won each main, you would move on to the next one.
Right.
So he was trying to go from E to A. So he the kicker there though is they had qualifying before every main. So he could win the E, qualify, start on pole of the D, win that, qualify, start on pole of the C. So I qualified second in the C, and then he was a guy that everybody expected to win, and I just was on his rear bumper, knocking his bumper off, and we gapped the rest of the field. And after that, I had a couple people come up and be like, man, that was BS. He shouldn't have been. That's not fair, because he was like multiple-time race winner or whatever. I didn't care. I was like, whatever. If he wants to do it, I don't care. I should have beat him. Like, I'm not here to win the C main. I'm here to beat all of you. So I don't care who beat me.
Everyone's
I just know
like,
someone
God,
beat me.
I already don't like this guy.
Straight up.
Carried a lot of humble.
Yeah.
And a lot of humility coming from the
Ask
stuff.
anyone who raced at Dromo what their first opinion of me was, and they will tell you they didn't like me.
Yeah. He'll even
You were that guy with the painted helmet.
Straight up.
And he would fake losing his head.
Yeah.
In an Enduro.
Yeah. Didn't fake it. Ask him. Eventually, you'll have John Cabral on the show, I'm sure. Ask him. Ask him what his opinion of me when he first met me, and he'll be honest with you, because I know what that answer is.
It's the same of all of ours.
Till this day.
And
so you go in here, you're doing the league thing. First time, you do not win the overall. You don't win the C.
Nope. Yeah, I finished basically straight up mid-pack. And but my lap times, I always, if that didn't happen, I wouldn't have come back the next month, because I knew he was one of the top guys, because he then went on to win the B and then finished like 4th in the A. And I went, dude must be good.
Right.
So I went, I was fast as him. I was just knocking his rear bumper off. It was just bad luck why I didn't beat him. well, so I'm going to come back and I'm going to win next month. So if that hadn't happened, I give him credit because I did learn a lot behind him. I learned how to drive Dromo because Dromo had these idiosyncrasies of being very loose. It was like a drifty track. And I was like, oh, okay. It's like dirt. Got it. All right. Well, let's drive it like dirt. Which, keep in mind, I'd never driven dirt before. but I knew what the idea was.
This is like the little you where you, it's just like a cup car. Just drive it like a NASCAR. Yeah. That's all you got to do.
It's a whole lot of just gung-ho, let's go for it. It's been my whole racing life. So next month I show up, and I don't remember much of the specifics, but I finished third overall, third in the A.
Wow.
Behind Clement Ing is how you pronounce NG for some reason, he came and raced at CalSpeed for a little while, but not too much. And then, he was kind of a kid, and then he raced competition karts. Jeremy Kane, I think was his name. Oh, wow.
Yeah.
But he was
pretty
way little Kane. At the time. He was about 9 years old at the time.
Gotcha.
They did not run weight at Dromo, by the way. And the three of us were nose to tail. And they had like an announcer and stuff. And
that's so cool.
And he comes out and he's interviewing us on the podium. And he goes, man, like that's one of the best races I've ever seen here at Dromo. And I'm like, we were single file the whole race. And he's like, yeah, but like anybody makes a mistake, you're going to pass him. And I'm like, okay, all right, sure. If that's the criteria, again, coming from an oval standpoint.
Yeah.
And he's talking to me on the podium and whatever. And there's probably 40 people there still, which is, pretty decent little crowd for an indoor race. And they're like, yeah, we don't know who you are. What's your background? And I'm like, I raced a bunch of stuff, whatever. And he's like, what's your goals for the rest of the year? I'm like, well, win a few more races this year. And they're like, what? Who is this guy?
Yeah.
And so I walk off the podium, and guy walks right up to me and shakes my hand. And he says, man, you don't realize what you just accomplished. This is a lot harder than you think it is. And I'm like, it's not that hard. And he's like, you don't realize how many people try to race here for a long time and never touch that. And some very accomplished drivers never touch that podium. And I'm kind of like, I kind of wanted to be like, what the heck? But then I'm like, looking at him, like, he's telling me the truth. Like, this guy's...
He's not jerking your chain.
Yeah, he's not, like, blowing smoke. He's not trying to bring me down a peg. He's being straight up with me. And that was Dennis Kimbrell, who I was talking to. And he's like... And at that point, keep in mind, John was not... He was a decent driver, but he wasn't, like, kicking everybody's butt at this point.
Right.
I think he'd won maybe one or two races, certainly been on the podium a couple of times, but was not the John that we know now in sport karting. And I'm like, okay, weird. Okay. And I didn't really know what to think of that. So that was race 4 of the season. I had missed the first 2 rounds. They had 10 race season, I think. I ran 6 or 7 more races, made the A main one more time that year. And I finished like 7th in that one. And I'm like, man, what is going on here?
Yeah.
And I couldn't figure it out. And it was, and I felt like I was still driving the same, but it was like, what I didn't realize was that you could not drive every kart the same way. That was the wake up call of, these are not set up to you, and they are not as even, not in the speed sense of even, but they're not all exactly the same. They may all be built at the same time, but they're not. You can't build 40 karts that are identical. You just can't. They could be all made by the same dude at the same time. They're not the same. And they ought to be driven differently. And they did a great job of equalizing karts there, as far as an indoor track is concerned. They were within about half a second, which is killer for an indoor track. But then I realized, I'm like, you got to drive this one, and that way, and whatever. So that was that. And then the next season, it started clicking again. Won like 4 races and finished. The finale of that season is actually a pretty good story, because basically I entered the finale second in points to a guy named Mike Kai, who also raced ASA Speed Trucks, but after me. So he ran it with Cameron. It was his first year in them. He goes up and wins his first race. He shows up first time and wins the A main. And I'm like, oh no, no way. And so he kicks ass the first 3 or 4 races of the season, but then everybody starts kind of getting back to him, and he starts kind of coming back to us a little bit. So going into the final race, it's me versus him. Basically, I'm like 6 points back for the championship, and I qualify 3rd in the A main. He qualifies on pole. I needed to beat him by 4 spots to win the championship, however the points math worked out there. So him and the guy in second actually start driving away from me, and I'm like, oh crap, what the heck? They both crash. Steering shaft deep into the tires.
Oh man.
And I'm like, looking at him like, holy crap. Like, all right. So I'm like head down and I'm just like purple, lap after lap after lap after lap, and just literally lap up to 5th place in this, 20 lap indoor track, like just laser focused. Well, he got pushed out of the tires and continues on. Coming onto the white flag lap, he's 1 spot out of the clinching spot. Him and I were on the same team, and we also had another driver that was on the same team with us who didn't know anything except for he's racing for the championship. He's behind me. I better get out of his way. So he gets out of the way on the last lap and lets him pass. And that wins him the championship by like 1 point. Man. And I'm like sitting in my helmet just like beyond upset. Like, what are you doing? Like, why would you get out of the way? Like, but he's like, I don't know. It was for 4th. Who cares? And I'm like, oh my gosh. And that was, so that was that. Next couple of years were, whatever. Dromo goes away. But by that point, I'd become friends with all these guys and so many people that maybe aren't racing anymore. And
you kind of brushed off the former egomaniac, if you will, the kind of big chip on the shoulder, and become a little bit more part of the community, part of the Dromoites, if you will.
Yeah, I mean, to a certain extent. I think it wasn't a conscious decision to do anything different, but it was kind of more of these guys aren't a bunch of scrubs. These aren't a bunch of nobodies that are just good at their local indoor track. These are guys that race sports cars. Some of them are professional drivers. Craig Stanton was a regular out there. Former IMSA, or I guess it wasn't IMSA at the time, but it was the NASCAR version of IMSA, whatever that was called back then. Grand Am. Thank you.
That's right. Yeah.
Former Grand Am prototype champion, like guys that could drive. Pat Long would come out there and play every once in a while. And these guys who were, top level, Alan Shudo, Indy Lights, was Indy Lights or Formula Atlantic? I guess it was Atlantic.
It was Atlantic. Yeah.
Which fun fact, Alan and I went to school together for 6 years in the same class. Neither of us knew the other one raced.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. Since middle school all through high school, we were in a bunch of classes together. We're friends. Never knew each other race.
That actually doesn't surprise me a whole bunch, because I found out after getting out of school that some of the kids that I was around were also into racing or did racing and stuff like that.
Oh, wow.
It was just not something that...
It was kind of taboo.
Racing wasn't popular in 90s. Yeah, like I remember when I showed up, and shame on me for doing this, but I'd have the Rainbow Warriors friggin' Jeff Gordon jacket on.
Yikes.
That was not a good idea. But I loved racing.
Yeah.
I liked NASCAR, etc. That's what I was doing. But I was the few and far between. There was not many that actually would flaunt their racing fandom.
The funny thing is I actually drove my race truck to school once and parked it on the field.
And Alan still had no idea.
I don't think he gave a crap what was happening out there. I think he was probably doing his own thing, because we weren't like real good friends. I mean, we certainly, he definitely, wrecked me in basketball a few times. Had a little bit of a height advantage.
I was about to say, yeah.
I was very short. Like I'm still not tall, but I was very short. But yeah, no, it just never came up, and then literally one day he raced at Dromo also, but before I started racing there. So I still didn't know he was a Dromo Grand Prix champion.
You never crossed paths,
Just never crossed paths. He was, when we were in high school, he won like the Dromo championship. Never knew. And then I come up a few years later, and I think it was at Long Beach when he was racing Atlantic car and finished second to Simona de Silvestro.
Oh,
and I'm
wow.
like, hold on a minute.
I totally recognize that name.
I'm like, that's not a common name.
Do you have the science homework? Because you're getting pulled away in the crowd.
And I think we've crossed paths here 50 times, and just like, hey.
Small world, man.
How long we go.
Right,
Small
yeah.
world.
But anyway, so then, Dromo went away, and there was a bunch of Dromo highlights that seemed big at the time, but it's just an indoor track. the 12 hours Dromo was probably the highlight, because an indoor 12-hour race was really unprecedented at the time.
Yeah, and actually they were the first ones. Because I was around the entire period of time when the indoor karting, or I should say sport karting in general, was huge.
Yeah.
You go all over the country, and there's all kinds of races, etc. And actually the very first endurance race was the 12 hours of Dromo in the beginning of 2008. Was
Right.
the very first one. And actually that same year was the very first year of the 24 hours of VLK.
Right.
Or Charlotte, actually, is what they call it. And that was in May. And the Dromo race was in either the beginning of February, or I think it actually was the beginning of February, the day before the Super Bowl. It was either 8-1 or the 9-1 that was that way?
That sounds right.
Because in the 8-1, my team finished second.
Right.
And in the 9-1, we won. But that was the very first time. But you'd have the 24 hours of Charlotte. You'd have the 12-hour race. You'd have all these different kinds of things. They were all arrive and drive. Never mind the fact, to your point, you've had these 40-person Grand Prix events, these league races. We had big numbers, 50-something at Sidecard up in the Northwest. Arizona was big. VOK had their own. So you had all your stuff in the Midwest. So as much as we see competition karting having all these different series and national championships and things like that, you had the exact same thing on the sport karting side. And I remember going down to Dromo and for that race. And it was the very first, well, I should say it was the second time, actually, that, the third time, technically, but that you would actually see, first time for an enduro, but one of the first few times that you'd see people from other areas of the country meeting. And actually in 08, Rob Howden was there doing a quick, it's either 8 or 9. It might have been 9 now, but I can't remember. One of the 2 years, Howden was actually there doing what he was trying to do at the time, which now would be so easy to do.
Right.
A live webcam thing of the with commentary.
Yeah, and he came back in 10 and did it.
Was it 10? It must have been 9.
I think he tried it a couple times, and it was kind of because he had like a winter house in Big Bear, which is not far from Dromo or something, or just came to visit. I don't know.
It was Temecula. I think he has a spot in Temecula.
Oh, that makes more sense.
Oh, he doesn't. I think he does now, but
yeah, no. In 10, he covered the whole thing like flag to flag, and that was the year we won.
That's because he had the indoor karting news deal,
right?
The spinoff of ECAN,
right? Yeah, which was ahead of its time. Well, sort of. I mean, that was the heyday of indoor karting, and I kind of glossed over
2007 to
I'd say
10-ish. Yeah.
And I kind of glossed over the whole KWC, or IKWC as it was, the Indoor Karting World Championship. I ran that for the first time in Phoenix 5 months after I started at Dromo. I showed up at Dromo for that first time unannounced, and didn't know anybody, whatever. And then 5 months later, I'm at the Karting World Championship in Phoenix. Again, I didn't tell anyone I was going because I didn't know. I just signed up and went. And all the Dromo guys were like, we know you. And that was
the team.
That's when it started. If not for the KWC, I probably wouldn't have become friends with all those guys, because that was the thing that sport karting always has over competition karting, is that you don't have anything else to do. You drive and you're done.
Right, in between.
Yeah.
Right. So you become friends with everybody very quickly, because you have to. And so that's how you get a lot of these zany stories that come out of, especially those national and worldwide competitions where you're done racing at 4. And maybe the racing is still going on for another 4 hours, other heats and that kind of stuff. And you got nothing to do but drink at the bar that they have on site,
right?
And watch a man wearing an all denim driving suit pour beer on his head, And those, I mean, you don't get that in competition karting.
Oh man,
there's
all
not,
denim. No,
no, that's one of the very few things we have over.
It's a Swedish team, a Swedish karting team. They were actually a rock band called Terror Pop.
Jesus.
This is 2007.
Think of the cartoon Metalocalypse.
Yeah.
And you're there.
2007 Indoor Karting World Championship in Phoenix. Or maybe 6. I think it was 6.
I think it was 7 because I was there for it.
Okay. Then it was 7. And yeah, this guy had it was jeans and then a jacket, but it was all denim and it was done up like a racing suit.
Yeah, it looked like a 2-piece, like almost like a drag racing.
Yeah.
When you said the what Swedish band?
It's called Terror Pop.
I thought of
the
album cover from Big Lebowski, that German band that's terrorizing everyone. That was the first thing I thought of.
That's okay. He's a nihilist.
Foreign album. Yeah.
The thing you got to know, especially with the early days of that national. I mean, these guys literally would fly from around the world to go to Phoenix, freaking Arizona, to race in a little podunk.
It's the place to be.
And the thing you have to know is that these guys were like, you know what? I want to go see the Grand Canyon. We're half an hour from there. Let's make a vacation. Let's go race. Whatever.
Yeah.
And
what's going on?
And we had some unbelievable talent, but we also had some guys that were there to have just a really good time.
Yeah.
Right.
Well, you had oddballs like myself who were literally there because it was a world championship of a thing, indoor karting in this case, that I was actually pretty decent at and what I could afford to go do, for that matter.
Yeah.
And it was really that last part, afford to go do. And it turns out there's a lot of people who are stupid good at this particular genre of karting. while there are also those who just want to go see the Grand Canyon and maybe do a little bit of karting, there's a stupid amount of talent. Kind of like what you had found out when you had gone from the trucks over. It wasn't just a bunch of, jack-offs. It was, nope, they actually know what the hell they're doing, and maybe they came from other types of karting or other types of racing and whatnot, came over there, and, God, do they kick ass?
Yeah, a lot of them were even just padding resumes. Like they're a driver that's trying to get somewhere, and if they can add a quote-unquote world championship, I hate to say quote-unquote, but you call it a world championship because it is, but it's not going and winning the competition, whatever FIA. It's not that.
Yeah, it doesn't. Yeah, it's not the same kind of prestige.
And none of us are under that illusion.
Yeah, but I will say it's had some stupid good talent show up there that has gone on to do other things, i.e. Stephen McAleer showed up and actually, I want to say, finished like top 5 or whatever like that overall. Brody Kostecki from Australia, he actually races V8 supercars. He was there as a munchkin, and he was actually trying to make it as a cup driver. I want to say trucks or K&N or something at the time. But he was a munchkin. He hadn't quite gotten the growth spurt yet, and he was a little chubby.
Yeah, and I mean,
but he was a wheelman back then. You could tell.
Yeah, and there was a ton of talent. I mean, I'll never forget that first year. I was running like 8th in a heat race they ran like 20 of us on track at a time. So
yeah, 25 was the max, usually in the final.
Yeah, so I was not running at the back by any means, but I'm running like 8th or so, running mid pack, and I'll never forget I get lapped by the leader, a guy named Pedro Washington, who.
One of the absolute best indoor karters there are right there.
This was the moment where I realized I got a long way to go. Because I'm driving this thing, I'm like, I'm doing pretty good here. I can probably
talk about the seat.
Yep.
Oh,
that's where I'm going with this. And I'm like, I think I can get a top 5 out of this, and I think I can go do this. And he laps me, and at first he kind of, I see the nose, and I'm always, one talent I've always had is being very aware of what's going on around the track around me. I knew this is the leader, so I see the feet, and I don't let him go per se, but I don't fight him. But as he passes me, I notice that he is driving with one hand, and I look over at his other hand, and he has it on the bar of the seat as he's standing on like the belly pan of the cart, holding the seat up because the seat strut had broke. So he's driving one-handed while using his left hand to hold the seat up, and he's leading, walking away with this thing. And I'm like, so how?
Yeah, so basically, and it happened pretty late in the run, to be fair.
Yeah,
from how the story
goes. But even one lap like that, I don't understand.
It was on the right side. As I remember, because if he had let it go, it was going to go up against the drive gear and slow him down.
Right. Yeah.
And so through all of the straight bits,
so it was kind of kicked forward,
and/or left-handers, he was putting weight up off the seat to keep that thing off the drive gear.
Wow.
Just again, like you said, driving one hand. And I remember, I don't think I was in the race, but I remember seeing it as well and understanding what was going on. I'm like, that is one of the best drives I've ever seen in my life, right there.
Because it was, if he was going through a left-hander, not only did he have to drive one-handed, he had to not lean. He couldn't put any weight to the right side at all, and it was wild.
That was brilliant.
And I was like, holy cow! Like, this is how did he just do that? And
you're getting laughed. You're like, I want that cart next,
right? Yeah,
drive gear or not.
That won me a dirt race a few years later. That memory, because I had a similar situation but different in that my seat didn't break, but I don't remember exactly what the failure was, but basically my seat started scooting over into the engine, and my clutch was coming through the seat. So on the dirt carts, you have an exposed clutch. There's no drum on it. It's all out there in the open.
That's not unlike the 206s as well.
Yeah, I guess it's similar to that. So it starts, I can feel it and I can hear it going through my seat, my fiberglass seat.
Yeah.
So I'm like, okay, this is about to be really bad because this is about to grab me in the side. As soon as it gets through this, and I've got like 4 laps to go. And it's an oval, so it's all lefts. So every time you go through a corner, you just hear.
Do you remember what position you're in?
I was leading.
Oh.
So, and I was leading by a bit. And so what I started doing is on the straightaways, because it was digging in on the straightaways as well, I sat down on the belly pan. But I tried to do that through the corners a few times, and it was still kind of digging in with my shoulders or whatever. So I had to basically wrap my left hand around the bar around the gas tank, and then drive one-handed like Mark Martin.
Pulling yourself out of the seat,
yeah, so that I wasn't sitting on the seat at all, and it held. And it wasn't exactly the same, but it was like as it started happening, I went, hey, no, I saw somebody else do this once.
Yeah.
I could do something the same way.
Isn't that cool? I mean, and how many years later is that?
Oh, this must have
10?
been 6 years. Nah, about 6.
Yeah.
This is 2012-ish or so.
Okay.
So, And then came through after the race and looked down at the seat, and it was through the seat. The weights were sitting there spinning in the seat. And I'm like, we're adding some sheet metal there before the next race.
And maybe, I don't know, fixing the reason why it's...
But that was a 99 Invader chassis. There was no fixing that to a certain extent.
Freaking clutch invading your space. That's what was happening.
Fun fact, that cart... So with the 99 Invader...
Yes.
Fun fact about that is they used to run a race in Tustin at the air base there called the Tustin Grand Prix. It was mostly for vintage cars, but they did run a go-kart race as well there. And it was a pretty big deal at the time. I think SCUSA actually promoted it. And the kart that I ran dirt on had won that race in 99, like in the KT100 class, which was big in those days. So that kart sat in a garage for, 12 years. And I went and bought it. Wait, this seems like a good dirt kart. Not offset or anything like you would want a dirt kart to be. And sandblasted it, painted it, found the chassis was cracked in half, and just welded up. And if anybody's ever tried to weld a kart, it's just going to crack next to the weld next, and so we'd weld it, crack again.
When he welds it.
I was about to say that was where the where the clutch was happening.
Exactly.
Going to your seat. That was the part that was breaking out there.
But it worked. That kart was so used up and so soft that it was just like, dirt's my
Is
jam.
that the picture of you in the white suit? Okay, gotcha.
Yeah, I was the only jerk off that would wear all white in a all white kart on a dirt track.
Everyone was like, "Look at this open wheel
really
guy."
Cool pick that's a cool shot.
It makes a lot of people it made a lot of people very upset because it was the same type of situation as Dromo. I showed up in an Alpine Star suit. Everybody else wearing jeans and a jacket.
Yeah.
Wearing all white, custom painted helmet, all white kart with like Euro bodywork. Bodywork. It's not a full body. It looks like they're trying to make it a sprint car.
Well, this is not JDM.
Oh my God!
Dude, these things look like the JDM wing, because they're like, we're going 40, but hey, the wing, and the side force.
That's
I don't know if
the triangle back, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't know if you'd
I
call
remember
it.
seeing that when I was a kid.
But the different demographics, if you will, of karting, like we were talking. I don't know if that's what we'd say. The different groups. The sport karting to competition
I get what you're
karting,
saying.
Genres.
I'm picking up
thank
what you're
you.
putting down.
Yeah,
Yeah,
he's picking it up.
don't say demographic. It sounds like you're
Yeah,
centering in on certain
the
people.
jeans and the jacket type. Yeah,
It's I've
Some bitch shit.
that's one of those
that's
things
the
where
demographic. Yes,
I've raced against most of the demographics. I still haven't run like a top level like SCUSA race, but I've run against a lot of those guys at other stuff.
right.
You did the car stuff, and basically you were doing roundy rounds for years. You move on, you get into the Dromo deal somewhat by accident, right? Because your brother's doing the mechanic thing. That's actually when you get into quote karting, really. Right. So when you're doing the arrive and drive stuff, that's basically the bulk of your karting, right? And that is first the Dromo, and then when you come out here. But when you're doing the CalSpeed stuff, and you had gone from Dromo to here, was it you just thought it was going to be an extension of, or how did you take that whole transition from the indoor thing to here? Because at that point, there was no indoor. You guys left indoor to come out here, and basically that was the start of the Super Series.
Right. So I had actually run one CalSpeed race before Dromo closed. There was a kind of a trial IronMan. They ran a 1 hour race that was by invite only. There was about 15 of us.
Just curious, how were the invites sent out?
Brad contacted the top guys from Dromo, basically.
Yeah,
Gotcha.
Brad, he was running this joint, and then having run.
Oh, he was already over here. At this point. Okay.
He was over there until early 2009.
Sounds
And they
right.
came back over here, and Dromo actually shut down at the beginning of 10.
Yeah, May 10 is when it shut down, end of May. So gosh, this 10-year anniversary, like right around the corner of it going away. Probably right when this airs. We'll be pretty much on the money.
Pretty damn close.
So Brad has been about a year removed at this point, or so, 6 months removed from being the GM at Dromo, and a few months before Dromo closed, none of us knew Dromo was closing. He says, "Hey, we've got some of these Sodi carts here at CalSpeed. Let's go do a race. You guys want to come out here and do a race?" I don't think he even charged us anything for it, if memory serves. And it was an hour race, and it was my first impression of racing sport carts out here was that I hated it. I thought it was the stupidest thing in the world, and so here's why. To my knowledge, there was not really a mechanic on those carts at this time. Were meant for corporate events, I believe. So I was literally
Just go drive.
a second and a half a lap off, And I was literally flat out on Grande.
Oh no, that's literal. Like we had said before in like the Cameron episode, there was no testing prior to me getting here in 11. And this thing ran all the way through 5. But no, they had 21 go-karts. And if you look back at the my laps, it was like seconds from fastest to slowest, and it was not what the people you would think they'd be that far off.
Right, and it was the guys that won that were not top drivers at Dromo. And you were like, this is stupid. That was my first opinion. I'm like, this is stupid.
It wasn't a good first impression.
It wasn't. It really wasn't. And it's if that had been a widespread thing, most people had a good time. I didn't. I'm flat out around the track. What can I do? Like literally, I was around Grande, and it wasn't like slip sliding doing the flat out indoor thing. It was literally I am on the throttle nonstop.
And what's crazy about that too is back then. So right now with the sport carts, it is the 270cc engine with the proper 9, which is the 9 horse, and it with the 9 horsepower carb, and it's basically it's not stock, but we've gotten closer and closer to stock now for longevity and also to make them close. Back then, they actually had advanced timing keys, 13 horsepower carbs. They were winging them like at $6,000 something. We're a good, I say wing, and that's big for them. It's over 1,000 RPM what we're doing now, easy.
Yeah.
And they were a good chunk quicker. Yet, old Patty over here still going full throttle through the hairpin.
He had the 9 horsepower
through
car.
Grande, I'm just whoop, just straight, and then down the straightaways. I mean, I'll never forget. There was one guy that literally passed me and kind of waved to me. That was normally a C main driver at Dromo, and I was like, "This is dumb." So a few months later, when Dromo goes away, Brad sends out an email to the kind of the same group plus a few and says, "Hey, we're going to start a championship, and we want your guys' opinion on some rules before we start." Originally, there was talk of carrying over the Dromo points over to CalSpeed to complete the season, which we all kind of vetoed, and we're like, "Nah, that just start your own thing."
Well, and you definitely were against it because if I remember right, you were leading the points.
Right. So I stood to gain the most from that. Where I was like, "Hey, if CalSpeed starts with these points, I have a points lead."
Yeah.
Because
Yeah,
Dromo
or
never,
you have the most to lose because
right. But Dromo never really officially ended their championship. The final season, Diego Morales and myself bought the trophies for everybody. So Dromo did not put a bow on it. So that's why I kind of, at first it was kind of like, yeah, I won the championship, but it was like, no, I guess I really, there wasn't one. So, when the series in June started up, June of 2010, I was like, I'm going to come race because what else am I going to do? But I'm not excited about this. Ran out, and after the first heat race, I was like, dude, Dromo sucks. Like, this is I thought it was the greatest thing in the world because I was so slow that first race that I had no idea there was such a thing as a draft here. I could not believe that there was a draft in a go-kart. I was like, that is unbelievable. Like that it blew my mind.
Yeah, and if memory serves, you guys were running on Nuovo out of the gate.
Right.
And back then we weren't winging them as hard or we weren't blowing them up.
Right, yeah.
Because we had all the extra RPMs to play with.
Right. So, yeah, that first race, I qualified second overall. I think David Arnold won pole. Won one of my heats, started on pole for the A main, and then didn't do as great in the main, but it was still like a blast. I finished like 6th or something. John won, of course. And
what was kind of consensus from everyone talking after?
Loved it. Everybody was like, dude, if we could have started doing this 5 years ago, we would have. Like, this is the greatest thing. Because they had done... Maybe they weren't testing, but there was some equalization that went in a little bit. They were within probably a second, which is huge out here. But at the time, it was like, we had the draft, and most of us sucked, to be honest. If any even B main driver, if you were to pluck them right now and plop them in that first Super Series, they'd win walking away.
Yeah,
I'm sure of it.
You guys were all trying to figure out how the hell to drive at CalSpeed.
Right, and there was no. The first time that anybody really figured out drafting as a team thing was in the IronMan later that day, when Taylor Hayes and Sam Brumley teamed up, and literally there was no rule against bump drafting back then. So they literally teamed up and just nose to tail pushed all race. The whole race. They pitted on lap 1, and the rest of us were out there having a good time battling. Like, this is great.
Yeah.
And they beat us by like 35 seconds.
Taylor has been pitting on lap 1 ever since.
Right, yeah. and that was, we were all sold. It was, at that point, Dromo became a distant memory. And it only became reminisced about really when we had to go to another indoor track, and it's kind of sad to say because it was the best. I still maintain it was the best indoor track I've been to as a driving experience.
Right.
The facility was nice, but there was no restaurant, there was no food, there was nothing. The facility was nothing
Nothing
special.
like you see nowadays.
But
Sure.
they made up for it with the people who work there and the give a shit.
Yeah, to a certain extent. You had guys like Steve Clank, who became a CalSpeed regular, working there. It's just he wasn't a manager. He was just a dude working there, and he cared what we were doing. And they had a lot of that, and that was really cool. And that's what a lot of tracks, especially a lot of the indoor electric tracks, could really benefit from is getting people who care.
Well, I mean, it's not unlike this place. I mean, at the end of the day, it's the people who you're around all the time. It's the give a shit. Mm-hmm. If there's passion behind it, you're going to see things do a hell of a lot better. You see it with Tri-C and the way those guys do it. You see it with anything where you got passion behind it, it will do better because the people who are working, well, they give a shit. I keep saying it, but that's what matters.
No, straight up. I mean, that's the big deal. And the track had such a unique way of driving it that has not been replicated. It had like a slurry on it, but not like a slurry here. I don't even know how to describe it. It was like dark black asphalt.
Had a layer to it though.
Yeah, it was.
It was definitely tough to get used to because it kind of like here a few years back where you'd have a situation where it felt slick, but then it could also rubber up a little bit.
Yep.
It was kind of weird.
And that made the 12-hour really cool because it would change throughout the race.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
And the Stratus carts they were using had a lot to do with that as well.
The Stratus
gonna
carts,
ask.
I'll maintain, are still the best indoor cart that ever existed.
No, they're garbage.
I loved them.
We had those at Apex up in Olympia.
To be fair, Dromo had an advantage because the owners of Dromo also owned Stratus.
They did have that advantage.
So they were very well maintained, and they were just like K1 owns.
They're very fragile, though. They were very fragile go-karts.
Really?
Very fragile.
Compared to a Sodi tank, yes.
Yeah.
Makes sense.
It's kind of like...
And they're wider, and to your point about the dirt stuff, the way they felt like you had to drive them, you had your track, being a track designer, I had to design a track that was wider for those carts to still be able to race as good versus something I could do with a Sodi cart, which was A, skinnier, and B, didn't require as much track to do the same kind of maneuver.
I always felt like, even out here, the Sodis are like riding a unicycle compared to a bicycle, in that the rear end's going to do what the rear end's going to do in a Sodi cart, and you're driving all off the front tires. That's the way I've always felt. Like it's just this pushy, dump trucky, it's like you're riding a bull that's standing on its front hooves. Whereas a Sodi, or excuse me, Stratos, it was almost the opposite, but you felt all four tires. At least for me, it just felt way more connected, and you could feel the chassis working. A Sodi is just like this plank of wood with four tires attached to it. At least everything I've driven. And out here, they do better than an indoor track. They're more suited to outdoor drive. I never cared for the pro carts here when we were doing the Stratos out here.
Yeah, I agree.
I don't think they worked. They were fine. They're fun.
Well, they weren't actually the Stratus, right? They were an older version from the UK, so they weren't even the same version.
But
Brad loved those things. I hated them.
They still had the same feel to me, but they were going too fast for what they were, and I never liked the balance. But the Sodis out here work, but you put a Sodi on an indoor track, and I personally hate them. Like,
especially if it's tight. I will give you that. Like if you take a new Sodi and go to most indoor tracks these days, and it gets super tight. Yeah, they're a little. They don't pick, so it's tough.
Yeah, that was always my trouble. That was why I did well in the Spain KWCs, because they didn't use a Sodi. The cart they used was much more Stratos. It felt a lot like the pro carts out here felt.
It looked like
Alphas, weren't they?
I don't know.
It's like a Burrell.
They were red.
The way it drove, it looked like it for sure.
And they were more my style. That's why I don't ever want to run a KWC again, because I'm never going to top what I did there. I just wish that I wish the event started on day 3, because my first 2 days were not good, and then day 3 on, I was a top 10 driver. But the KWC I did in Phoenix was on. No, it wasn't on Sodis. That was
Carolyn's.
Yeah, which reminds me of my favorite ever mechanics story from karting. Is somebody wrecked one, and I'll never forget, they pushed it back to the mechanics area, which was right in front of the lounge where we were sitting, and they put it up on sawhorses, and this mechanic walks up to it, scratches his head, is looking at it, kind of like confused, and then I see him get a light bulb over his head, and he goes, okay, I know what I'm going to do. And we're all watching him through the window, like fish. And he walks back out of sight to his toolbox, comes back, and he's holding a mini sledge. And he goes, and he winds up and just cracks this frame right in the middle, just wailing on the front of this cart, right dead center on the chassis, just hammering the ever-loving dog shit out of this thing. And we're like,
Yeah, it's called tuning.
Yeah. And we're like, holy shit. All right. And we're like, okay, well, they'll probably test it first and equalize it. They put the wheels back on that bad boy, roll it right back in the line. Doesn't run a lap of practice.
That reminds me of another little gem of the same place. This is F1 Race Factory. This is before its name changed to Octane, and also before it moved, but also a KWC, or IKWC at the time. And I remember we get done with a heat race. It was one of the longer ones, I think. And we're walking past a car. Luckily, none of my team had to run this one, but there's literally a puddle in the seat.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, man.
And it wasn't a clear puddle either.
No, we aren't racing that long, mate, but somebody could not stop, or would not stop, I should say, and somebody just pissed their pants. And it was in the seat.
One of our guys had it after that. I don't remember his name. He didn't stick around. He worked at Dromo.
It's too traumatic after that. You're done.
Yeah, we got him about 6 rolls of paper towels, some actual towels, and he raced with a towel under him. And he was not happy. He's like, I want a new cart. And they're like, nope, too bad.
Yeah, that was.
He's like, then I want to see the pisser.
Right.
Because that guy's responsible.
Because this is a pisser.
Yeah. So what somebody else had told me, and I don't think it's true, but somebody said that it was not somebody peeing in it, but it was one of the denim guys again pouring beer on the other guy, and that it was actually beer in the seat.
That's believable.
I don't know.
It's totally believable, but there was enough.
All denim? People like that would
They
do
said
that.
he was overheating and they didn't have any water, so they poured
Which
a
is
pitcher of beer.
ironic because literally the ambulance was called for one of them getting dehydrated before the
Because they were
weekend.
racing in
Man,
denim.
stuff. Yeah, exactly.
It's not good.
Stuff is all added up.
It might have been, man. I tell you what, that's kind of the some of the fun stuff.
It's
over
always
the
been a
years.
controversy.
Man, this is like
The controversies of the
end of
yellow,
Usual Suspects when he's putting all the clues together on the board. Just, God damn.
Got the red yarn going from one thing to another.
Yeah, there you go.
There's been a lot of those, and that like to me
Denim racers.
Yeah, right. That's been the favorite parts of going to those international or national championships, is all the craziness that happens from people of different cultures getting together that don't normally hang out but all have the same interests. Like there was when we went to Spain a few years ago, we were eating at the Applebee's, I believe.
That's where you go when you go to Spain.
Yeah, we went to Madrid and we ate at the Applebee's, and we're sitting there, Team America, eating our Applebee's, and the waiter was like stoked. They were so stoked. They had a California pin on their sleeve. Like, you guys are from California? We're like, well, most of us. Not Andrew Wood over here, but most of us are. And he was super stoked. Like, yeah, I got real ones. And then the team of...
He's a Spaniard, though.
Oh, yeah.
Okay, gotcha. The California pin, I'm like, is he from California?
No, he was from Spain and just loved
poser,
California,
man.
apparently.
Wow.
And we're sitting there, and then across the way, we see the Belgian / I guess Netherlands team. They kind of hang out together. I think Dutch, I don't know.
Yeah.
Yeah, same.
They're
And
right next to each other on the old map.
They kind of raced together, I think. And they went and sat down to the KFC across the way in the mall here. And
the Colonel, nice.
Immediately, Diego leaves and goes hangs out with them because they're better. They're better company, and they're just chilling there. And then I see one of the guys at some point just like start making a scene, and I don't know what's going on. Like he's like, I don't know if he's telling a story or what. He's just flailing around. We're like, what the heck is going on? And then they leave, and we're like, what the hell? And we end up seeing them later on, and we're like, what is going on? And like, you guys seem like you're really having like a good time here. They're like, well, I don't know, like KFC, they didn't have any chicken that I like, so I got mad. Away we went, and like
Diego's left sitting there alone.
Diego came back, and we're like, and it's like one of those things where like you're sitting there and you're like, what in the hell is this, a normal occurrence, or like is this just what happens when you put Belgian / Dutch guys in Spain? Like they get mad that KFC. I mean, I'd get mad if KFC ran out of the particular chicken I wanted. I never got to the bottom if it was popcorn or wings or thighs.
That is an important thing too, because if you don't have the right chicken,
right,
for a KFC to run out of chicken in general,
a type of chicken.
Bad.
I think they had other chicken. They just didn't have
any kind of
maybe
chicken
popcorn or whatever it was.
What do you got to say?
we're cutting this.
I wish that had somewhere better to go, but it was hilarious at the moment. We were dying at the Applebee's.
One of the cool things, regardless about what country or, like, as you say, the different cultures and whatnot, is that you are sharing a particular interest, a particular passion, and that is karting. So no matter if it's Phoenix or North Carolina, California, Europe, doesn't matter. You can not know a whole hell of a lot of people, but if you're doing the same bloody thing, and that is karting, you immediately can become fast friends. And it's
Right.
a lot of fun to actually see those same people year after year after year, and even stay in touch with them. And it's
Right.
actually a really, really cool thing, because no matter what happens, you're still sharing that thing. You can end up battling each other like a mother, and you don't even know who this person is. As soon as you get done with the scale line or whatever, and they take, like, you're best friends now. You just had a awesome battle during that heat race or main or whatever it may be.
That was how I got to meet Jose de Silva here.
Oh, really?
Like during a lot of our my first Super Series together, it was like always him and I starting like within about 3 spots of each other in the heat races. And next thing you know, we're just linked up and kind of working together, if you will.
I didn't know Jose was ever that slow
Oh,
to be hanging out with you.
I had a bad day. That was all it was.
Nice.
You're right, though. He was slow. But yeah. No, he had the bright blue suit, all white helmet, same style he has now, just no paint on it. But yeah, it's cool to complete strangers on the track, and then 10 minutes later meeting them on the grid.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and
Or in
they
scales.
also like follow, like at the KWC at least, they kind of follow what the guys are doing. So like when I went out there, there was him well, Matthias. I had never, I didn't really know him. We'd raced both at the KWC in Phoenix, back in 2007 or whatever it was. But me and him never really talk or anything like that. But I'm running practice in Madrid, and he comes up and he goes, "Hey man," like we were old friends, and I was like,
And it'd been over 10 years.
it had been literally like 10, 11 years. And literally, like, we've been in the same building at the same time. We never really had talked. But he started following CalSpeed, or I guess at Dromo at that point, knew everything that was going on. And, of course, some of our other friends had gone and raced. Logan and Miles and John had gone and raced. So he followed them, and he knows, and not just him, a lot of those guys know the CalSpeed people, even the people that probably don't even know he exists.
Right.
He knows, and a lot of those other guys know what's happening at CalSpeed all the time. Because at the end of the day, there's a lot of people, but it's a pretty small community, and they see what we're doing out here, and they don't have anything that's quite the same out there. They have their outdoor tracks, but they're not really the same as what we're doing here. And they have a lot of different tracks they go to, so it's kind of like this different thing. We have one track that's really good.
The one thing that they make up for, right, is while they don't have a regular place like this for a championship, they do have a lot of one-off events.
Right.
Because you can spend 30 minutes and drive through 5 countries. It's how close they are. So you can have all these different one-off events and one-off championships you can do. I mean, Ruben Boutens is going to win them all anyway.
Right.
But
And
you can
that's
at least go and attend all these different things.
And that's the reality, is we have our season championship where it's all season, but they have like 10 one-offs. Like, I'm the Netherlands champion, or I'm the Dutch champion, or I'm the German champion, or blah, 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 whatever.
Netherlands and Dutch are, I think, the same thing.
I was going to ask, yeah.
Whatever. I barely made it through any geography classes, okay? Or I'm the Belgian, they all have their own country championships, which is cool because they're all some of the same people, and then a lot of different people.
And then they actually back that up with the actual pride of the country behind it, which actually makes it a lot more fun. And that was one of the things that was really cool when you went and did the IKWC back in the day, right? At Dromo, there was a good group of people from Dromo in SoCal, and they were all huddled next to each other, etc. And it was myself and just other people from the Northwest. But we were all Americans, so by default we were on the same, quote, team.
Right.
But then the Brazilians would hang out over here, and they were usually fairly close to the Belgians, and so on and so forth. They had these different groups.
Alphabetical.
And they were nice. And they were all by country, basically. And I remember the very first time, and no one's really talking to each other at first. And it was a neat deal because you go out on course, and what you did on track spoke for you.
Right.
If you go out there and you're towards the top of the charts, or you were making moves and doing things, you got the respect right then and there for knowing what the hell you're doing. And that just grew as the event went on. And then the following year, you didn't earn that anymore. You were talked about by the other groups, like we just said about Pedro. We would talk about, watch out for Pedro Washington. He's going to be one of the best bloody guys out there every single time. Werner Trugler, Alex Gubbenberger. We would talk about the exact same guys every single time, no matter what. And you earned that 2-3 years prior and carried it on to the next one and the next one and the next one.
Right.
And people you would see 360 days later, and it was like you'd never skipped a beat.
Yeah, then you have some of the guys that kind of intersect almost, and kind of, guys like Andres Prieto, who's, it seems like he's friends with and knows everybody in race. He doesn't race. He's not American, so he doesn't race as an American at the KWC, but he races at CalSpeed all the time. So he's kind of an adopted American guy at the end of the day. But he's not. He's not racing for the U.S. when he's out there. But it gives us kind of an in of like, now these guys are kind of our buddies.
Common ground. Yeah.
Yeah. Now we're like, hey, we're on track. Help them out a little bit. They help us out a little bit.
Yeah.
And and it creates a cool thing, because when you go to these other countries, there's only like at best about 5 Americans.
A lot of times.
And the Europeans don't have to go nearly as far. So even like if you're in Spain, England's pretty quick flight. So you'll have 10, 15 British guys, but you've only got 5 of you. So there is a little bit of, you need every bit of help you can get. So you find some of those other smaller in attendance countries to help you out, and you guys all kind of create your own little United Nations to try to go against these guys. And it really creates a cool dynamic, and it's something that I wish everybody could kind of go and give it a chance. And it's really expensive. The event itself is very reasonable for what you get. You get a lot of racing for like $500 or $600.
It's travel,
right?
It's all travel.
It's travel, time off work,
and it's the opposite of when we used to do the Grands here. It's very reasonably priced, but then if you live in Europe, how do you justify coming to the U.S. for 3 days of racing?
100%.
And it's, and it's doable for some of the guys who want the vacation, but the exchange rate becomes an issue, and flights to the U.S. are expensive, and everything's far away. So like, if you go to Europe, you can go and get on a train and see a lot of stuff in a couple days. You come to the U.S., let's say you come to Fontana. You can go see LA, which there's nothing to see there. You see the Hollywood sign, and that's driving distance. And then you could theoretically drive to the Grand Canyon. That's a 6-hour drive minimum. Las Vegas is another 5 hours from there.
Yeah.
And it's like,
Point being is that it's not right. It's not hop, skip, and a jump.
Right. For those guys, it's really hard to justify coming here, because you can't do that much. Like, if you got 3 weeks, yeah, sure, you can see it all. But it's not like you can go hop on a train and be in Washington, D.C. tomorrow. Well, I guess you could, but it's going to be expensive.
Yeah. It's not the kind of tomorrow you were hoping for.
Right.
But I think a lot of those guys did find it worthwhile just for the racing and the event,
Yeah, I mean, once they came and tried it out here, most of those guys came back.
Yeah.
But it's hard to get them out here the first time.
Yeah, and the ones that didn't, it was all about money.
Yeah.
Right.
That's all it was. It's not like they didn't have a good time, And all the different racing that you've gotten a chance to do, whether it be, the old school roundy round 7 and what was basically a kart, the trucks, the indoor, the outdoor, and you even got a chance to do the dirt stuff, and we didn't really talk about it much, but you got a chance to do some 206 stuff as well. Out of all the different types of karting, what's the most fun for you, but also maybe what's some of that racing that you've done that you wish you had maybe another shot, or maybe you would do again if you had the means?
Well, that part's easy. I would give the circle track stuff another shot and do it a different way. Go different series. Go Legends cars or go super late models at Irwindale and do something more focused. And that was in the days of the Toyota All-Star Showdown at Irwindale. So if you were a hot shoe there, you might have a shot of impressing somebody. So here's in regards to like what the most fun thing I've ever had. Here's a fun fact that not a lot of people don't know. I don't think anybody knows this. Is I don't have fun when I'm driving. I do not find racing fun. What it is though is before the race and after the race is fun. I like competing. I like winning, and I like having a good race afterwards. But while I'm driving, I am not having a good time. I am an incredibly high stress, high anxiety driver. I am not having a good time when I'm driving regardless.
Is a lot of it expectations?
Yeah, because if I'm not at least on the podium, I'm not having I'm below my expectations.
So that reminds me, actually, one of my very first students, Lon Bromley, actually, junior, who his dad was actually the head of the Champ Car safety team. Same Bromley, yeah. But he was my first student, and for him, his fun was driven by results. He had fun after the fact.
Right.
But during it is business. It is game on right now. We're not doing this because it's a good time. We're doing this for the results. And we were just doing indoor karting. But it was the same deal, is that he would take it serious, go for the championship. And actually, I went to the USIKC with him once. And it's 100% for a result.
Right.
And the fun is here or there.
For me, the fun is going for a championship. It's going into the final round, having a chance to win. Like, I like the math and the strategy and all the effort that goes into winning a championship. But while it's happening, I am not having a good time. I mean, I worked here, so I was with Mike all the time in a weird situation where I was going for a championship at the same time. And at least on Tuesdays when I would come into work for the first time after a race, I mean, I'm sure you could see it that I was either in a very good mood or in a very not good mood. Depending on how John did, mostly. So it was, and that's how I've always been. I'm not one of those guys that sits in the car and battles back and forth and is like, this is so much fun, unless we're just screwing around having a good time. That isn't fun, because I don't want to be getting passed by you. I don't want to be battling with you. I want to pass you and I want to leave you in the dust. I want to be gone. And to those, that's the only time I'm having a good time while driving, is if I'm leading and I'm gapping. If I'm pulling away from everybody, I'm having a good time. And there might be times after the race where you battle it out and you're like, man, I got him. Cool. That was fun. Because you beat him. But if you lose,
kind of hindsight deal, yeah.
Right. If you battle I'm one of those drivers that if you battle somebody back and forth all race and you lose, that is inexcusable.
And so there is not, so I was just going to ask you, there's not a scenario where, man, I didn't win, but God, that was a good time battling. That's not you.
Not in an actual championship race, no. There might be times where you go, that was a fun battle. He beat me fair and square, and you take it with a grain of salt, and you go, he got me. Fine.
That's got to be tough. Like I said with my first student, I mean, what's tough about that is you're going to lose a hell of a lot more than you're going to win.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, how many races do you think you've done, and how many wins do you have? I mean, that percentage is small no matter who you are.
Yeah. I mean, I've probably. I mean, I know that was a rhetorical question, but I'm kind of thinking about it now. In that I actually haven't. The reality is I haven't raced that many races in my life, because most series I ran 10 or 12
It's
races
too bloody
a year.
stressful. You can't do it.
Right? Yeah. Most series I ran 10, 12 races a year. We'd run every 2 weeks or so, maybe one. And karting, sport karting's once a month.
Right.
So all in, I've probably run 500 races in my life as far as actual championship type races, and I've probably won 80 of them, which is better than most. And most of my losses came here, to be honest. Because, I've won 8, and there's been, 105 Super Series or something like that?
Something like that.
And I've run about 90 of them or so. So, 8 out of 90 is not...
Get 10% range, somewhere right in there.
Yeah, I mean, Logan's only one above a 10%. But, I mean, that's just... Like, if I want to go have fun driving, I'm not going to race. I'm going to go and get in a car and go drive, or go run. So what I do find very fun while driving is hot lapping.
Oh, but I hate hot lapping.
So I don't like it in a go-kart.
Qualifying.
I hate it in a go-kart, and especially in a sport car. Because driving by yourself in a sport car, especially out here, is just not fun.
Yeah.
But if you're in a car, trying to go better is a lot of fun. But at the same time, I only find it really fun if you have a way to have telemetry where you know how you're doing as the lap goes on.
Sure, okay.
So I don't like, unless it's a short lap, but I always liked doing this at indoor tracks, is where you can see your lap time when it's got a lap time. And it's like 20-second laps.
Yeah.
It's like faster, 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 faster. I find that very fun. And I find that very relaxing. Because if you can get into the mode where you're just running laps without thinking
Just
about
a rhythm.
it. As Craig Stanton calls it, getting into your subconscious, that's very fun. But when you're battling somebody, to me, there's very little of that that's enjoyable, because I'm trying to beat you.
Man, that's crazy. I'm so 100% the other side.
Really?
The chess match is the most fun for me. I would much rather race the entire time, just battling, and win or lose. That was a fun ass race right there. Yeah. Now I would prefer to win,
right,
or prefer to at least win the battle. Even if it's for 14th,
right.
But God dang, do I love that mental aspect. That's so much fun for me. And meanwhile, my least favorite races are the going away Sias.
Yeah.
God,
Yeah.
I hate those. Those are just throw the checkered.
Interesting. It's like if I had that mindset, I feel like I'd never win a race. If it was just I'm having a good time battling.
Well, to be fair, I don't think I'm thinking about how much fun I'm having. That I'm not doing. I'm thinking about beating the person and how to do that. You realize how much damn fun that was after the checkered falls.
Yeah.
You're not thinking about this is so much fun.
Oh, I mean, yeah, I would rather that than the worst races are when you start up front and then something.
Oof.
And you just
I don't care who you are.
And you
If
just
you go the wrong way, that's always bad.
yeah, that's. I mean, yeah, those
Like, for instance, at Buttonwillow, at Pro Kart, I started off pole. Yeah, off pole. Fought my way to first in the first couple of corners. Fought to hold on to it. Eventually lost it, fell to second, and then battled my ass off and pulled off every trick I could think of for the rest of the race to hold on to second. But I was the slowest of the top 4 or 5 dudes. It was tough. But afterwards, I'm like, man, that was a good time.
So that's one I'll give you is that when you know you've got a slower car and there's no expectation, at least in your own head, if you're like these guys are for whatever reason faster, but every time they pass you, you get them back. That's fun because you're kind of like, that happened to me in a 206 RaceGear once where I had the wrong gear on it because I listened to somebody else.
Don't do that, Mark Connell.
And well, so let me actually go the other direction with it. There's a better one. There's one where I went in a different gear, which was the right choice, but only because I knew what I was trying to do before I did it. I ran an extra or a one less tooth on the sprocket in a 206. So at the end of the straightaway, I was just
a little extra.
They come off the corners and there was 2 guys that were teammates and it was just them 2 versus me. And they'd come off the corner and they would just hook up and they'd get right up about half cart and then they'd hit the rev limiter and I was right back in front barely. And then I'd go into the corner and they, you can't drive through them. They'd try, but they couldn't do it. And they would, we were running classical backwards. And every time we'd come off a corner, I'd feel them just knock my rear bumper off. It's 206. I mean, one tooth, they come off the corners a lot faster than me. So we probably had, in a 10-lap heat race, we probably had 14, 15 lead changes, but I led every lap. Wow. If you want to think about it that way. Like, they would pass me, but then every time at the stripe, I was a foot ahead.
Was
every
this,
single lap.
Back in the CRG?
Yeah, this was in Logan CRG.
Wow. I remember that.
And that one was tons of fun because I knew even in my head, I was like, they're going to beat me because eventually they're going to figure out what's going on here and they're going to do something different. And I'm going to finish third and great, but I'm going to keep them back there as long as I can. But they never did. So every lap I led, it was like a little prize. And I'm like, got you again.
Nice.
And every time I was leading at the stripe, lap after lap after lap. And it was just, I was actually literally laughing in my helmet because I was having a ridiculous amount of fun because it shouldn't have been happening.
But you weren't going for a championship or anything, were you?
Right.
Gotcha.
I wasn't. So
that little caveat there.
Right. If I were going for the championship, I still would have done the same thing in the sense of I still would have ran that gear.
Maybe not laughing as much in the helmet.
I mean, maybe because it kept working and it shouldn't have.
Yeah.
And all they had to do was try to pass me somewhere else.
Yeah.
They kept doing the same move lap after lap after lap. But, and that I found very fun. It's when, if your expectation's to win, you can't be having a good time to be battling for the win because that means you might finish second. If your expectation is to finish third and you're battling for second, hey, okay. But why is your expectation to finish third? Unless there's some sort of, extenuating circumstance. So that's, I've never, people always say like, oh, driving this car at this track is like so much fun. It's like bliss behind the wheel. And I'm like, how? Like, what? I don't get that. Like, I kind of do, but I kind of don't. Like, if you're just out there having a good time, not looking at lap times and driving the car and sending in the corner and having fun, hey, that's a great time. But there's just 2 different things. Driving and racing are not the same thing.
Agreed.
They're just not.
100%. Yeah. I'll race all day. I could do without the driving aspect.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It depends.
There's a section of corners, there's a section of tracks that I'm like, God, that's a fun little section. You know? Like at Supernatus last year, the second, or the set of S's was pretty damn fun. The second S was really fun. Especially when you got it right and you could just feel it on 3 wheels and it would just rail right through. That was a blast. Yeah, that kinds of stuff. I understand that, like driving, it's fun. there's spots like the Technico circuit and Classico counter and things like. There's a couple of different things that I really like, but yeah, in general, I could do without the driving and just get straight to the racing.
I mean, every once in a while, when a car or kart does something you don't expect it to do, when you try something and it works, you're like,
right.
oh, all right.
Yeah.
Or like you're driving a new car, like something you never driven before, right? Or a new chassis or whatever, and you're like, and it kind of does it without you even trying, and you're like, whoa, okay, hold on, I didn't expect that. And that's fun. I mean, I'm not sitting behind the wheel being angry necessarily the whole time, but it's kind of just like a focus of like, either we're winning or we're not. And it's gotten to the point in the sport kart. And I feel like that's part of why I haven't been winning as many races ever since I won the championship is I don't have that mindset anymore of if I'm not winning, it's not good enough. Now it's kind of like, there's a couple reasons for this, but it's kind of like I'm out there. I'm like, hey, I'm going to have fun with everybody. These are my friends. I'm racing with them, and I'm going to beat some of them, and I'm going to lose some of them, and I finish like 5th, like every race. And part of that is I do, and this is a little bit strange, but I do feel I can't get as aggressive if I'm trying to sell somebody a racing suit. I can't move them out of the way. And
Right.
I've never, it's been, I feel like since before CalSpeed came around, I haven't been that driver very much. I've not been that move you out of the way driver like I used to be when I was younger, because you can't. It's just BS-y to do it in a sport kart. If it's a competition kart and there's danger in it and whatever, but in a sport kart, like you moving somebody out of that way, bump and run, like why? Well, like what did that do?
Yeah.
We could all do that. So I feel like I'm already not that aggressive. Like I'm optimistic and I'm very aggressive on the brakes, I feel like, but I'm not aggressive as far as contact.
You've made some pretty badass maneuvers, my friend. First thing that pops in my head is actually a move that you made. I want to say it was either Nuovo or I think it was Sportivo. And it was going down into Sportivo, and you made like 3 or 4 freaking wide. It was badass, and you made it stick. That was pretty sweet.
That was one of those situations where I did not have the cart to go right into where I was, and it was like, let's go.
It's got to do something.
That was the year where I was running for a championship, but I was kind of losing ground, and it was like
we got to not do that anymore.
We got to come out at least with the top 5, and I was like, if we throw it in the tires, so what?
Right.
And just went for it, and then I got them both, and then they got me back a corner later.
Yeah.
It just nothing I could do.
They couldn't let that stand.
Yeah, I know. And but I mean, so like that's things. I always feel like I'm optimistic and I'm aggressive on my moves, but I'm not aggressive in the sense of I don't ever try to put the bumper to somebody.
Yeah.
Unless if I put the bumper to you, it's on purpose.
Yeah. Right. Well, and again, too, knowing that the rule set's against you in the first place. It's not circle track. You can get away with a little bit.
Yeah, and I mean, and the reality is we can get away with it here to a certain extent from the officials, but we're not going to get away with it from the other drivers.
And that's all racing across the board.
Right. No, and it's not a knock.
Let's say that the officials don't see it. The guy's going to go, look, either you did it to me or you got help to do it to me. Either way, it's how you approach it and how you work through that situation that really defines how it goes forward from there.
I would say the best way to explain it now is that anytime I make a move, if I know it's going to be aggressive, I have a little bit of a moment where I say, how am I going to justify this when the person comes up to me and they're angry afterwards? And I better have a way to justify it.
Yeah.
So it doesn't mean I'm not racing these people. It doesn't mean I'm not trying.
Sure.
But it means there's that 10th of a second where I go, I can't just, when this person comes up to me and goes, why do you do that? I can't just shrug my shoulders.
Yeah.
Right. I can't just say, I don't know, let's try something.
Yeah.
Because now I have to be the guy that people like racing with. I have to be the guy that races them very hard, but races them clean, and they feel like they're getting a fair shot.
I mean, certainly you've got the business incentive, but I mean, regardless, I think the longer you do it right, it's like you want to do it the right way. I know growing up, my dad was like, race people how you want to be raced. It was the Mark Martin thing. You want to make sure if you're making anything happen, you can live with that. It'd be no problem. Like you said, afterwards, do you have to justify it, or is it justified in itself?
Yeah, and I was always, my mindset as a kid, and I don't think this was taught to me. This is just what I always figured is that you can race people however you want if they can't catch you, and that was how I always raced as a kid. Is I was always faster than everybody else.
Hence, you reckon everybody is a little one.
It was if they can't get back to your rear bumper, what are they gonna do about it? And that was always how I raced.
Not invite you over for the birthday party.
Didn't care. I tell you, I did not care. I didn't. I mean, that's the reality is I did not make friends at all. And that's no surprise to anybody. When I was racing karts and mini stocks as a kid and didn't care. But then out here, it was kind of like, I don't care how good you are. You are not going to win every race, and you're not going to just drive away from these people. You're not, no matter what. So you, at some point, you have to realize, hey, you're going to race these people to wheel. Even if it's some dude that you perceive to be slower than you, you're going to still be racing him. You know, like in that movie you were just talking about on Sportivo, there's, one guy in there that was traditionally is like a D main driver, and he was having a very good day, and I was having a not so great race, and we're racing wheel to wheel. I got to be nice to him. Because what's he got to lose? I mean, if he stuffs me in the barriers, what does he care? Yeah. So you got to
looking at it.
That's your first impression on this dude. Like, you may know him for years and years and years, but he's never raced me before. So you can't leave him going, man, that guy sucks. Like, dang, like he sucks to race around. Not like he's slow, but you can't get people thinking, man, that guy's just no good to race with. Because at some point you're going to need him, whether it be helping you out in an endurance race and you're lapping him, or maybe he's going to get better over time and he becomes the dude you're racing with, and he'll remember, hey, that guy raced me really cool a few years ago when I was just starting out. I'm going to cut him some slack. Yeah. And that's something that is very unique to sport karting, I think, because most other forms of karting or racing, people, they get faster, but at the same time, you have wheel to wheel, of course, but you're not back and forth and on each other's wheels for 10 laps.
It may be a lot more hanging out, paying attention, or you may be race to race that you see this person again,
right.
But a little bit less of the wheel to wheel. As we get back into this thing, I know that the season's already started. What was your game plan? You've won the Super Series before. I believe you've also won the IronMan Series before, etc.
Yep.
What was your plan going into this year? I think you had told me that you weren't going to do Super. You're going to take a little bit of a back step, but it was maybe the Ironmans that you're going to... Is that still the plan for this year, is to try to finish out the Ironman Championship?
Yeah. My goal was to go for an Ironman Championship. First race went really poorly, and then I had to miss the second race. So I already feel like that's pretty much out the window. I just don't think with the competition level there and where my current speed is, I don't see how it's going to work. So could I get a top 5? Yeah. Top 3, maybe. Is a championship possible? Yeah, sure. Until it's mathematically out. But so at this point, my goal is still I'm going to run all the Ironmans. I'm going to Ironman the 2 hours. I'm going to run Classico. I'm probably going to run the finale. But now my goal has shifted a little bit in that the Ironman Championship season is more of a training ground, where my goal here is I want to do something that I've been wanting to do for a few years now, but I haven't had the money or the time or really anything to put it together. Is I want this year, my new goal is run the Ironman Championship, do the best I can. But now my focus is I want to be the first driver to Ironman Machismo. And that's my goal now at this point. That's what my focus is on. And the fact that we're not racing is hurting because
it's not helping you.
Because it's very hard to train mentally is my biggest problem. iRacing helps, but you don't have, it's a combination. It's, physical and mental needs to work together. Because the physical aspect, I can go run and get myself in good enough cardio. The cardio I'm not worried about. I'll get that handled in a month or two. That's not a big deal. These karts aren't that physical to drive. But they are physical enough where your mental aspect gets drained.
Yeah.
So that not racing right now is really hurting.
Sure.
So that's still what I'm focused on right now. I'm not going to do it in a pro kart, obviously.
Right.
Super sport is the plan. And that's the focus. I'll make that commitment as the Ironman season goes on. If I come out of a 2 hour and I'm drained, then I'm not going to do it. So I'm not sitting here saying that I'm going to do it. I'm saying that that's my focus, and that's what I'm working towards, is to see if I can do it. So there's a few things I'm doing. I'm doing a couple of 4 and 6 hour iRacing events that are meant for teams that I'm going to do solo, and then I'm trying to work on a way to make those a little more physically demanding.
Yeah.
Force feedback only goes so far.
Sure.
Right.
Well, and like you said, it's going to be more of a mental game than physical when you're doing it that way. And it could be mental being in the seat that long. Having done 4 hour stints or so, like Coke 600 and stuff like that on iRacing, it could be a challenge. But with that kind of looming in the horizon and whatnot, have you thought about what you want to do? Anything beyond that? Like, do you have any karting goals besides that, or is that kind of the one thing? Like, you started out with, I'm going to go for IronMan Championship, and then you're like, it hasn't started off so well, so I'm going to shift gears a little bit. Do you have anything that, as the off season happens, you're like, I'm going to do this next year or anything like that? I mean, I know now you get the family and the business and whatnot, but
yeah, and it's, there's only so much I have left to do here, and I don't feel like I'm at a point where I'm going to pick up something new. I bought a 206 a couple years ago and ran it and had a great time. Actually, I bought a World Formula and it became a 206. But it just, I couldn't put the effort into it that I wanted to. I'm not going to go and just run around mid-pack. It was not fun for me. The driving was fun, coincidentally enough, but the rest of it, I was like, this is just work. So for me, I'm going to keep at this as far as sport karting, until I win Classico. Even if I just run 1 or 2 Super Series a year, I'm going to keep running Classico and probably the round before it for another, at least 1 year, maybe another 20 years. We'll see. So Classico, I've got to win. Once I Ironman Machismo or decide I can't do it, that's it for Machismo for me. I won it a couple years ago overall, and I've had very little desire to race it again. I'm not an endurance driver type of guy. I get bored is actually what the thing is.
That can happen.
It's not so much that I like, it's not a losing focus where you're like trying, you're like, oh, I can't focus. It's literally, I'm like, man, like, I just want to be done with this. Like, this is going a long time now.
12 hours, in fact.
Yeah. And so I just want to do that as almost kind of to prove it to myself that I can do it. And to my knowledge, I don't know that there's not that many endurance karting races that are 12 and 24 hours. And I know people have done 12 hours total in 24-hour races. I think you have, done more than that. But I don't know if anybody in any karting race that's ever done 12 hours straight.
I mean, you've got the world record stuff
sure.
like Trey Shannon and whatnot, but
those are going on 24, aren't they?
Those are 24-hour deals, and I want to say they've gotten, they take breaks and stuff like that.
Yeah. So that's the thing is worth noting is that if I get out of the cart and sit down at Machismo, I'll feel like that doesn't count.
Yeah.
To me, this is you are in the cart. The helmet does not come off for 12 hours. You get water. Maybe you have to stand there for a second and drink some water, but you do not get out of the cart. That cart doesn't get left in the pits. You're competing, because my ultimate goal is to Ironman and get on the podium. So that's
tough.
To me, like, is that realistic? Probably not. But I want to complete as many laps as possible, and it is not I'm going to go sit down for 20 minutes.
Right.
That to me is a failure.
Well, you're not going to be able to be on the podium sitting down for 20 minutes. That's for sure.
Yeah. If at that point I'll put a second driver in. The kart's making 12 hours.
Yeah.
And if I can't do it, I'm going to have a backup driver, and that'll be now we're going for
and you could still go for an overall win or whatever, or a class win.
And that's just it. So that's kind of the plan there. But yeah, it's that. Once I've done that, Machismo, I love the event. I love everything it stands for. It's just not me.
Yeah.
Classico, we're gonna eventually win or keep trying. And then honestly, let's say theoretically I win Classico this year and I win the Machismo, or not win. I mean, that'd be cool, but I complete the Machismo Ironman. I mean, that's probably it. I probably come back for a couple races a year, maybe, to scratch the itch, and then you probably don't see me again as far as racing until my daughter's old enough to drive a sport cart.
There you go.
If she wants to.
Right.
And at this point, she's looking like she wants to. So
well, there's kid carts before that.
Yeah, I was gonna say. I mean, that'll be a thing. Is I'm sure if she wants a kid cart, we're gonna do all that stuff, and we'll go down that path where I will not be driving so much.
Right.
Maybe I'll get myself a cart to stay sharp and do that kind of stuff.
Maybe do a little bit of teaching.
Yeah, and that's something I still very much enjoy is the coaching, which I don't do that much of these days, but really enjoy that. So yeah, I mean, in a perfect world, I accomplish those 2 goals I have left in sport karting, and I go run a KWC here and there for fun. And if my daughter wants to go kid karting, we do it. And even if she's running a freaking K&N car and Indy Light car when she's 15, the second she's old enough for a sport car, we're going to come run a Super Series.
Nice.
So that's there's another goal there of a parent child have not won a Super Series yet, It's been a couple close ones. Doug, Yanni, and Alyssa Young are probably the two closest ones at this point.
Dennis has gotten close.
Dennis got close, but at this point, I think Doug is our only realistic option on the horizon, and dude's getting better all the time. Could happen.
Demas's.
That's fair. You know what? That's really fair. But they both have to do it.
Yeah, and so far they're 0 for 2.
Right.
But
you're
they're
right.
close.
As far as overall, they're every
They
bit as
probably have
close.
the best shot right now.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Ayrton's in our iRacing league. Ayrton's getting. Well, he's been good from the beginning, but dude's fast all the time.
He's picked it up these last few weeks for sure.
Yeah, and we saw it out here when they got into CalSpeed. I mean, they went from new guys to fast very quickly.
Yeah.
So you're right though. Is once one of them wins, then I'll be like a little bit like, oh, okay, we got to grow her up a little faster.
Come on, Marlene, let's go.
Right, we got to get the Henry Morse program going.
Nah, jeez.
Nice.
That would be. I don't care about being the first on that, but that would be really cool.
Oh heck yeah!
And
It'd be a cool father-daughter thing.
Yeah, no, I was always hoping that I could get Kaylee, my wife, into it enough that she would get to an A main level. But she never, I think, took enough of an interest in it to do it. Because I always thought that would have been really cool to also be the first, married couple to do it. Because she's actually very talented. She doesn't care. She'll get mad that I say she doesn't care, but she does. I mean, she does not really care. Once the helmet's on,
what's the truth then?
Nice.
It's once the helmet's on, believe me, she cares.
Yeah.
But it's there's no prep work.
Right. Yeah.
If you don't, it's something she does for fun. You know what I mean? And that's half the Super Series field. But those are the kinds of goals that I'm now looking at. Is how do we do something that hasn't been done very much before, and how do you make it something unique?
Well, and certainly one of the things that kind of keeps it relative, I should say, keeps it a smart thing for you to stay in part of is the Red Six RaceGear deal, and the ability to try to sell suits and stuff like that. And once again, man, like I said, thanks for coming out and hanging out with us.
Yeah,
and
this is fun.
Chatting with us and all this other kinds of good stuff. But on that Red Six RaceGear, if someone wanted to get some gear from you, kind of do their own thing, how are they going to get a hold of you?
Yeah, so I mean that's something that we're the goal is I was going to be at the track for every sprint series, every super series, and there hasn't been too many of them so far. Right. So that's the easiest way, and that's not going anywhere. I don't intend to be a stranger out here, even if I do take a step away from it for a little while. The thought is that these guys all are in spots where I was a few years ago, where I wanted that custom suit. I wanted to look cool, and there wasn't many people catering to it, or at least doing it in a quality way. So, best way is red6racegear.com. That's where everything's at, all the info, all the pricing. And what I think the biggest question I get is, what are the limitations on the suit design? And the answer to that is there are none. You can do anything you want. Literally, it's a piece of paper going through a printer. It's just a suit, so they're sublimated. So it's the same thing. You can do anything you want with the suit. Any colors, any design, anything. So get in contact with me. You can email me at patrick@red6racegear.com. Phones are an interesting thing. Texting the phone number on the website is the best thing to do because the absurd amount of spam calls I get every day are unreal. Like everybody,
let it ring, let it go.
I'm going to voicemail.
Yeah.
At the risk of losing a sale here and there, I don't really answer the phone.
Text or email, eh?
Text an email or leave me a voicemail. If you leave me a voicemail, I'll call you right back.
Gotcha.
Like right back. And that's the reality of, my personal number gets almost no spam calls, but my work number is like literally 15 a day.
Oof.
Wow.
And
are they all from, and this is nothing mean or anything like that, but are they all from like the you ever get the Pakistani or Chinese, things that emails like we are a manufacturing goods deal from such and such.
Yeah, so I get
those all the time in the email.
I get about 100 of those emails a day.
Oh, geez.
Phone calls, they just hang up. I guess they're just phishing attempts or whatever.
The phone calls I've been getting are about real estate, buying houses and stuff. And
Derek Esquibel, that's the name that's out there for the.
I was getting a lot of those on my personal one, but then Verizon rolled out a spam blocker app that actually works.
Nice.
And I no longer get spam calls on my personal one.
Nice.
Time to move the old business over.
I might have to. It is frustrating.
Man.
Believe me, it is really frustrating.
One giant tease to have that on the work phone. Man.
Well, man, thanks again. Thanks again for coming out here and playing with us a little bit. This is a hell of a lot of good time, and I got a feeling we're going to be having a Patrick Britton episode again in the future, maybe somewhere in the neighborhood of Machismo.
Yeah, and I mean,
I like that.
That would be fun. I mean, we could definitely, if I especially decide to pull the trigger on soloing that thing, there'll be a lot to maybe go over there. And I think you got a whole outtakes episode already in the can here from this one.
Jeez.
Lots of good jokes going on there. I can actually ask you during the Machismo, I was like, do you really think this is such a good idea? About halfway through, and the huffing and puffing should tell me enough.
I intend on having a way to either live stream or communicate. I'm going to for sure be able to communicate, but I'm going to have hopefully a live stream of the entire 12 hours. That's funny enough. That's my biggest focus right now is how do I live stream the whole 12 hours?
You got to put the logo out there.
And I've got I have a pretty good idea of how I'm going to do it. With being able to hear my spotter and everything over the live stream. And then I intend on having a way for my phone to be able to pair into it on a number that is new, like it's just for that race. So if that's the case, I'll be able to give it to certain people that can call in and actually, if you want to like record part of the podcast and can it while I'm driving, that should be possible.
Wow.
Man.
I don't know about all that. That sounds kind of cool, but I don't know how the hell I would do it while also putting on the show at the same time.
You'll probably have to get Sarah
right?
or something,
Jeez.
somebody to run a quick interview. But that's I definitely want it to be something like that, and it's going to be fun. If I decide to pull the trigger on it, we're going to do a lot to it. There's going to be giveaways involved in it, in the sense of it's going to be like those what do they call, like jogathons or whatever? You make a certain amount of laps, and
Right, yeah.
So there'll
That's
be
taking me back.
charities involved potentially. People can put down, a donation based on how many laps they think I'll make, and then people who do donate, there'll be giveaways, free suit to anybody who
The
is
one
willing
that
to
you
donate.
wear in the 12-hour.
Right, yeah, right.
Exactly. Congratulations.
Half off right here.
So we're working on all those details, but I'm trying to make it something really fun, so it's not just me,
Just turn in laps.
Yeah,
Right.
Something that even if I'm not competing for the win, because the reality is I'm not going to be competing for the win.
Gonna be at least having some incentive out there.
Yeah, got to have something where, hey, another lap. Every time I'm putting a lap in, I'm generating some money for
Something.
a charity of some sort. So that's the plan, and we'll have a lot of details on that and make it really fun. You guys can just give me the leftover cart. That's the old Sody with the old body work.
Right.
That's
There
a
you
second
go.
and a half off from
the
that
test
first
cart.
Ironman.
Three.
Yeah, give me the three. Please give me the three.
All right, man. Well, thanks again.
Thank you.
We'll
See you
catch you on the next one.
Yeah, thank you.